Hey everybody, hey Julie, thanks for hanging out on the stream and chatting with us. We are live inside our newsroom here at Fox 5 DC and happy to be here with you. As you can see, the satellite, this is the live satellite tracking Hurricane Florence down in the Caribbean, in the southeast there, and you can see it is really, as Mike just explained, if you were on our Facebook Live, it is primed to hit the Carolinas later on. So we'll have updates throughout the day from inside our newsroom. We're going to have meteorologist Gary McGrady in the hot seat with us to explain more. So be on the lookout for that. If you're interested in more information throughout the afternoon, we're going to be your source. So stay on with us here on YouTube, or if you're on our website, all the way to the bottom of the screen, fox5dc.com. We're here for you for those updates. And if we have any updates regarding emergency sort of protocol for this type of event, or what some of these states are going to be doing, we will definitely shoot you down to those live streams as the governors speak out more about what they're doing to protect their state. North Carolina, South Carolina, probably seeing the brunt of it. So we're going to be, again, talking to the meteorologist about this. Meanwhile, we are here for our live and breaking news show here inside the newsroom. It's Fox 5 Live. Oh, let me get this all situated. And here we are on this Monday, September 10th. Tomorrow, of course, the anniversary is September 11th. On a Tuesday, it'll be 17 years since that event. We'll have some more coverage of some of the memorials for that tomorrow on tomorrow's show. And then today, we're going to be queuing up just some of the big topics and the top stories that we've been tracking from the weekend, including that Serena Williams incident, that scandal over the weekend, and sort of what people are saying about that. We're going to have one of our social media producers here to kind of chat about that, as well as anything else that breaks. We're going to be here for you for that. So stay on with us here, guys. Right now, jumping down to what I believe is some sort of press conference in Dallas, and we're gonna see what this is all about. Take a look.
White officer with all the kind of extra that comes with that.
As your Dallas County District Attorney, it just makes me more committed to do what's right and fair. That's the only thing America, it's the state of Texas, Dallas County want. They just want to make certain that there's equal justice. And I'm committed to that. However many times it happened, or however many few times it happened, it doesn't matter. It can happen 1,000,000 times, it can happen one time. My commitment is to make certain that there's going to always be equal justice in this county. And that's my commitment to this community.
Can you speak to, one last question, can you speak to whether or not there's any truth to what the council members said, placed on social media about no one wanting to sign off on the warrant?
I'll speak to that.
I don't know anything about it.
I'll speak to that. It was totally false. It is a terrible thing for an elected official to get in the middle of an investigation that the Texas Rangers are doing and possibly hurt the DA's chances of doing what she wants to do. And we looked at every point that he made, and every one did not happen, and everybody should know that categorically it's wrong.
Mayor Rollins, we asked the district attorney how she felt about the police officer turning herself in Coffin County and whether she's concerned about the optics of this. Can you offer your opinion on whether you're okay with her being allowed to turn herself into Coffin County and get out within an hour?
As mayor, you would do a lot of things differently. But my job as mayor is to make sure that in the long run, we get things done correctly. Every step along this way has been done professionally, and we are here today talking with the family that we've got a chance to make this happen. And so for me to kind of second guess little things like that, we're on the wrong side of the decimal point, guys, when we do that. With that, I also want to introduce a special guest here to Dallas, Texas, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Alan Chesney. Thank you so much. I talked to the Prime Minister on Saturday after we talked, and he was in North America and wanted to show up. So he's going to be meeting with the family. We'll be meeting at City Hall. And thank you so much, Prime Minister, for you and the ambassador right there, okay, coming here, and I appreciate that.
And I want to just piggyback and say to you, whether she's turned herself into Kaufman County or not, this case is in Dallas County. And the same, whatever treatment she's going to get in Dallas County, she's going to get it, regardless of the fact that she turned herself into Kaufman County. That was a call that the Texas Rangers made. I was not a part of that, but it doesn't concern me because we're prosecuting this case in Dallas County. And we're prosecuting this case and looking at it thoroughly. We will be ready for the grand jury, and as I indicated, we are going to have everything we need. We would have talked to everybody we needed to talk to. We would have done everything we needed to do before we present this case to the grand jury.
What do you mean?
They will have all of the facts they need to make the right decision in this case. So, again, we are not concerned about the fact that Texas Rangers allowed her to turn herself in Kaufman County. So don't you be worried about that, okay? Thank you.
Can you please
Yes.
clarify whether or not murder will be an option, might be an outcome of your investigation? Can you say right now that murder charge might come out of
That it very well may be an option. That may very well may be. So we're not saying to you it will not. What we're trying to say to you is that we are going to have the grand jury is going to have a full picture of what happened in this situation. They're going to have a full picture.
In closing, I ask for the citizens of Dallas to respect the family. They're going to go through some difficult mourning. We've got a service on Thursday, and let's try to lift them up in those thoughts and prayers. Thank you, guys.
And I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you for your questions. And again, as I said to you, please continue to pray for this family.
Could we hear from the Prime Minister why he's here, his reaction to all of this, please?
All right, guys, as we mentioned, again, we are switching up feeds here to kind of bring you the latest breaking news, and I really hope that sound issue is fixed. Do let me know if you guys are hearing some static. We're hoping to keep this audio really crisp and clear for you guys to listen in, but we do have a variety of things just kind of popping up, and we're going to see what comes up next. It looks like they are prepping for some sort of press conference regarding either again this shooting or something else. So we're going to keep our eye on what this is next. But for now, we're live here inside the newsroom. We're going to show you some of the top stories of today and this weekend as we go into a new week here, Monday, September 10th, and we are definitely tracking Hurricane Florence. As we mentioned, this is a big one. A lot of people are kind of focusing on this on their news programs, of course, and as they should. You can see here this picture from our AccuWeather team of the storm, where it is, and what kind of track it is slated to make. So later on, we're going to have Gary McGrady, our meteorologist, sit with me and chat more about who this might affect, and you can ask questions, and especially if you're down there in the Carolinas, it is definitely important to note what is going on and to make sure you really take the precautions. And our meteorologist Mike Thomas was telling me earlier, make sure that you tell people, the viewers, everyone included, to really take this seriously and evacuate where that is needed. So we're going to keep our eye on this and keep you in the loop about it. For now, though, I'm just seeing a couple of screens here, nothing really pressing. Again, right when Gary gets in, we're going to have him talk a little bit more about this storm and keep you guys in the loop. Other than that, I'm sorry that the sound is a little bit scratchy. I am going to try to work on that with an engineer in just a second, and we're going to make sure this volume is up as well. So hopefully you can hear it at least a little bit loud and clear. Let's go to some of the top stories from today and this weekend, including sort of a recap of the Miss America pageant and some of the drama surrounding that, and some other sort of precursors to 9/11 memorials for tomorrow, as well as some updates from the Trump administration. Take a look.
White House officials are working to identify the writer of the blistering New York Times op-ed criticizing President Trump. The anonymous author claims to be part of the resistance, people within the administration essentially trying to block the commander-in-chief. Trump calls the piece an act of treason and says it should be investigated by the Attorney General. Democratic Senator Chris Coons says that suggestion, the idea of the country's top lawyer investigating a newspaper editorial, is a significant concern.
What's the basis in law for investigating who wrote this editorial? He thinks the Department of Justice should act more like the in-house lawyer department or legal department to the Trump organization rather than what they are, the independent agency charged with defending our Constitution.
Legal experts say it's unlikely the DOJ would get involved. An opinion, even a critical one, is not illegal, and the author does not appear to reveal any classified information.
The president's concern is that this individual may have responsibilities in the area of national security. And if they've now published an anonymous editorial that says that they are misrepresenting themselves.
As for the author, Vice President Pence says they should walk away.
It's not just deceitful, but it's really an assault on our democracy, and that person should do the honorable thing, step forward and resign.
DOJ will not confirm or deny any investigation. So far, at least 33 cabinet and cabinet-level officials have come out and publicly denied writing the op-ed. Reporting at the White House, I'm Ellison Barber, Fox News.
Tempers inflamed after a massive fire destroyed a popular 200-year-old museum containing millions of ancient artifacts. Hundreds of protesters gathering outside the scorched remains of Brazil's National Museum Monday.
How can we explain with words what we lost? We are here today to say goodbye to that monument and to fight for its restoration.
Police sparring with demonstrators using pepper spray, tear gas, and batons to try to hold the crowd back as they pushed into the park surrounding the gutted building, wanting to see the damage for themselves. The federal government says with the help from investors, they'll put $3.6 billion into restoring the building and rebuild its collection.
For planning and accompanying the restoration of the museum, the federal government, together with the university and the ministries, will create an executive committee for the restoration of the museum. That committee is created to accelerate the restoration.
But some believe the pledge to rebuild is a lie, saying officials were warned about the risk of fire and could have spent money up front to prevent it.
What I feel is more anger than sadness because it could be avoided with a minimum cost. It could be avoided by spending on fire prevention. There was not even water. So, are there guilty people? Of course there are guilty people, and they have to be punished.
The cause of Sunday's blaze remains under investigation. The museum's director says at this point it's impossible to know just how much was destroyed. In New York, Chris DeMeo, Fox News.
Brett Kavanaugh sat through grueling hours of sharp questioning, procedural fireworks between senators, and vocal protesters. But now it's up to the Senate Judiciary Committee to vote on Kavanaugh and send his nomination to the floor so the full Senate can provide advice and consent. 21 senators serve on the Judiciary Committee, split between 11 Republicans and 10 Democrats. If Kavanaugh wasn't so controversial, the committee could consider his nomination at a meeting on September 13th. But committee rules allow for a week-long delay, so don't expect a committee vote until September 20th. The outcome will likely fall along party lines. Then it's on to the floor. Last year, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell established a new precedent to shut off filibusters on Supreme Court picks when senators considered the nomination of Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. McConnell unilaterally lowered the bar from 60 votes to stop debate to a simple majority. The Senate just swore in Republican Arizona Senator John Kyle as successor to the late GOP Senator John McCain, so Republicans appear to have just enough votes, 51, to end debate. The procedural vote should fall on Monday, September 24th. Once the Senate votes to end debate, it's just a matter of time. A confirmation vote on Kavanaugh is expected no earlier than Wednesday, September 26th. The Supreme Court's new term begins on the first Monday in October, the 1st. At the Capitol, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
More than 25 artists contributing to the Tigga Kneepad exhibit. Grand opening Friday night at Arch Enemy Gallery in Old City. The art explores the impassioned reaction to former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick's taking a knee during the national anthem.
The thought was to take the pads from white and make them black. to like highlight the issue of like black lives being lost by police brutality.
The art, in many ways, an ode to Philadelphia, from the homegrown artist to the physical display, the pads arranged in the starting formation of the now famous Philly Special play call.
And that you don't leave, you know, walking away from a piece of art, a piece of political art, feeling satisfied by the artistic value, but rather to feel fulfilled and feel motivated to be political and active.
The kneepad's made from a mold onto which each artist has rendered his or her own interpretation of what it means to take a knee. The art has an obvious political bent, and Arch Enemy Executive Director Patrick Schillen says he is aware many patrons will hold opposing views.
I think there's a lot more common ground than sometimes it seems like there is. By being able to hear what our artists have to say, take a second listen to what maybe some of these public figures have to say, maybe we can reach a place of understanding.
This initiative aims to put health care data as much as possible in the hands of patients themselves.
The Trump administration's announced plans to partner with the tech industry to make health data more easily accessible to patients and transferable among healthcare providers. The goal? To revolutionize the way Americans manage their health. The big idea is to make it easier, faster, and cheaper to transfer patient information between doctors, providers, and insurers. But the key to all this? Cloud technology. And that's where companies like Amazon, Google, IBM, and Microsoft come into play. The federal government's been trying to force American healthcare to go digital since 2014, when the Obama administration mandated all healthcare providers use the electronic health record system. But according to healthcare experts, the current system is failed and wasteful.
Today, the majority of medical records are still shared by fax, not through the electronic medical record system.
Critics call the government's end goal a $30 billion unicorn, and cybersecurity experts echo those concerns.
My concern is building one massive system never works. If it was easy to do and if it could have been done, it would have been done with the $30 billion that's already been spent on it.
When it comes to the government's new partnership with the tech sector, experts are ringing alarm bells about patient data privacy.
According to the federal government, there are 2.2 million entities that can have access to our information. Now, the patients are not involved in that at all.
Cyber experts are also concerned about data security. They insist that if the government and tech sector are going to share Americans' health data, they have an obligation to protect it. They say the first priority should be to harden the record system against hacks, both domestic and foreign. In Washington, Jillian Turner, Fox News.
Hey guys, back in the newsroom here on this Monday. Some stories for your Monday morning. I want to let you know that we are focused today on providing you the up-to-date coverage with Hurricane Florence, which is now at a Category 3 storm, and this really cool live satellite that we are showing you here that will obviously change throughout the minutes and hour, and we are going to have our meteorologists here at Fox 5 DC explain some of this when they come in and can chat with us about it. So be on the lookout for that. But meanwhile, we are going to also get some family reaction. Here's your shot right here of the stage being set. Family reaction from that bizarre case in Dallas where the female off-duty cop walked into the wrong apartment and shot an unarmed black man in that apartment, and the details sort of still fleshing out. We're going to hear from the family in just a few moments. So over to that in just a few, guys. One more story for you, and then we're going to jump over here.
Coronado made that bold post on social media this week saying she will no longer serve police out of her Southwest Detroit food truck. That post obviously getting some mixed reviews. A vow not to serve police. Owner of food truck Rocky's Road Brew in Detroit, Rocky Coronado, says it's because, quote, the majority of my neighbors, customers, and myself do not feel safe around law enforcement agents.
I just felt like it was pretty inappropriate.
George Azar is the owner of a restaurant next to where Coronado parks her food truck in Southwest Detroit. He couldn't feel more differently than his neighbor.
You know, here Southwest is should be a case study for how to police in this country.
In a good way.
In a good way, yeah.
George grew up here. He says most of the police in DPD's 4th Precinct did too.
All the police here, they're all community based. Like they actually stop in and say, hello, how you doing?
Coronado says she's refusing to serve law enforcement for the, quote, safety of her customers, something Azar doesn't understand.
I'm like big brother on the block, I guess you could say. I was here before mostly all these new businesses came up, and I'm from my neighborhood, and I actually was like, hey, Rocky, you should kind of calm down a little bit.
He's hoping that Coronado changes her tune because he wants the block to keep thriving together.
I don't want her to feel like an outcast. However, like she needs to maneuver a little different.
We talked with Detroit Police Union President Mark Diaz about this. He says the news is disappointing, but his officers will continue to serve everyone. We did try and contact Rocky Coronado, but did not hear back. In Detroit, Jessica Dupnack, Fox 2 News.
51 women representing each state and the District of Columbia vying for the sparkling tiara during the 97th annual Miss America competition. And Miss New York, Nia Franklin, beating them out to be crowned 2019's Miss America. Last year's winner, Kara Mund, transferring the crown.
This is incredible. I can't believe that I am Miss America 2019.
This year's format altered in the wake of the turbulent Me Too movement, with the swimsuit portion dropped and contestants no longer being judged on appearance.
I was so inspired to see how just smart the women were and very impressive with their clothes on.
The organization also axing the term pageant, referring to the event as a competition, which now focuses on empowering women, individuality, and social initiatives. But that crown didn't end up on Franklin's head without controversy leading up to Sunday's competition. Gretchen Carlson, who was at the forefront of the Me Too movement, was named the organization's chair in January. That's when 2018's winner, Mund, says leadership began bullying her. The controversy prompting calls for Carlson and the current board to resign. Carlson denies the claims.
This is going to be a wonderful year.
The 25-year-old newly crowned Miss America is a classically trained opera singer, and outgoing Mund is hoping to become the first female governor of her home state of North Dakota. In Los Angeles, Marianne Rafferty, Fox News.
Well, this may be another rough week for the administration with the release of Bob Woodward's new book, Fear, but the president is likely to make the argument that this is more evidence that the mainstream media does not give him a fair shake. There is one event on the president's schedule today, lunch with Vice President Mike Pence, and it's hard to imagine that they won't talk about what has had the media scrambling over the past week or so. Reports from within the administration of chaos and breakdowns, including one from an anonymous insider.
It's not just deceitful, but it's really an assault on our democracy, and that person should do the honorable thing, step forward and resign.
The vice president and others within the administration defend the president, but other Republicans are growing concerned.
But it's pretty clear that this White House is a reality show, soap opera presidency.
And it's impossible to ignore the midterm elections that are now just about 2 months away. And the resistance is mounting, with President Obama now on the campaign trail.
In 2 months, we have the chance, not the certainty, but the chance, to restore some semblance of sanity to our politics.
But with control of Congress hanging in the balance, the Democratic playbook may have to go beyond just the president.
You got to talk about the issues. We're not going to win this election being anti-Trump. We got to talk about what we're for, and that I think is going to be very important for November.
Voter turnout is always a big challenge in midterm elections, and that's where we may have some cross currents here. On the one hand, there are a lot of highly motivated voters out there, but on the other hand, there may be a lot of voters who are simply tired of all of the political bickering. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
World War II veteran Harold Heidelberg is living life to the fullest.
Well, I spent 91 years of doing a lot of things.
He's been to 105 countries, owned countless of businesses, and is an avid big game hunter. But his latest adventure, dressing up as a clown and jumping out of an airplane, all to give his beloved wife Diana a one-of-a-kind birthday surprise.
It's a birthday present. Today's her 80th birthday.
And a surprise it was.
Big of you. Thanks. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Yeah. I like it. What a surprise. My husband's going to jump out of a plane.
The couple has been married for more than 10 years. They do everything together, but this time, Diana is not joining in on the fun.
He wanted me to jump, and I said, my feet are staying on the ground.
With one giant leap, Harold made history by becoming the oldest person to take a plunge with Royal Gorge Skydive.
I'll never give him up.
It's unclear what his next adventure will be, but one thing is for sure, this daredevil will always be on the go.
I don't want to be a couch potato and shrink away. I'm just not going to let it happen.
As the dog days of summer come to an end, the swimming rules at Pirates Cove have gone out the window. Hundreds of dogs diving in this morning, raising money for a good cause.
This is total chaos. If you love a dog having a good time, this is the place to be.
Stephanie Barris brought her dog Valley, pitching in $15 at the gate for a pass to the pool. The proceeds helping Freedom Service Dogs of America.
So fundraisers like this truly help us be able to change lives.
Erin Conley's goal, turning shelter dogs into service dogs.
We put the price tag at about $30,000 to train each dog and then match them with their person.
Their trained service dogs can open doors and turn on lights, many given to local service members and veterans for free.
It's really a magical moment, and it really gives people more independence. You know, that's what we're all about, giving people that independence that maybe their disability took away from them and giving it back to them through a dog. So it's really a cool moment.
And while these dogs might not be cut out for service work, they certainly had fun, fetching big bucks for a worthy cause.
This is always the end of the summer, is shutting down Pirates Cove with the dogs having fun.
In Littleton, Evan Krugel, Channel 2 News.
It's all about doing things differently at All Square in Minneapolis, from their craft grilled cheese to the people that they employ to make it. They, and even some of the people on the board, have been formally incarcerated. And the goal with all of this is to hopefully change the way that people think about those with a criminal background.
3, 2, 1.
Grilled cheese. One of America's favorite comfort foods. It's all you'll find on the menu, but All Square in Minneapolis is about so much more than just the cheese and bread.
Those who have paid their debts to society are All Square, and free to move forward into not just a job, but into a vibrant life and a vibrant career. And so we're trying to use our social capital to support people in getting there.
The restaurant is built on the premise of employing, empowering, and investing in those that have formerly been incarcerated.
When they're in here, people know that they have a record, and that's a big deal. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of strength.
Finding common ground through craft grilled cheese.
It's kind of an equalizing thing, right? I don't know anyone who can't enjoy a grilled cheese, and I think so much of this is building a space where all of us from diverging viewpoints, diverging backgrounds, perspectives, can enjoy something that everybody loves and hopefully talk about some real things and generate some real change.
Through opportunity and the All Square Institute, Emily hopes to break down the social stigma.
It's a professional development institute. We're focusing in on law and entrepreneurship. We're generating leaders. We're trying to change the narrative.
Using a little comfort food, a little bread, and a lot of cheese. If you're really into grilled cheese, you can actually purchase a lifetime membership for $1,000. You get free grilled cheese for life, and the applications for the Institute reopen in January of 2019. Reporting in the newsroom, Alex Leinert, Fox 9 News.
School is done for the day, and kindergartner Brooke Adams is headed home with her mother.
Good job. Brooke loves it.
But this 5-year-old is attending school under a temporary court order. Brooke has a rare form of epilepsy called Dravet. She needs THC, the key ingredient of cannabis, to treat her strong seizures. But under law, cannabis is banned from school campuses.
It's life-saving. Many kids that have Dravet, they can have long seizures and go into a coma because they can't stop them. I mean, that's how dramatic this could be.
This is video of Brooke having a seizure this summer on a San Diego beach. Her mother puts a few drops of the THC oil in Brooke's mouth and the seizure stops in minutes.
It's like your body's running a marathon in a matter of minutes. Brookie, you want a book? Here, there's some books.
Brooke can't be in school without the THC oil close by, but the Rincon Valley Union School District worries that allowing a banned drug in class could jeopardize millions of dollars in federal funds. The district says the courts need to clarify whether a school district is allowed, quote, to place a student on a school campus and administer her medical cannabis in that setting, despite legal requirements to keep that same medical cannabis off school campuses.
I don't see the federal government coming in and taking us off to jail or, losing their funding because one kid is taking medicine that saves their life.
An administrative law judge ruled last month Brooke and her THC oil can attend school for now, pending a final ruling. Currently, the young girl has a full-time nurse at school who carries the medication. Brooke and her mom hope she doesn't have to leave school.
I think that'll be devastating. So I'm hoping the judge will realize how, insignificant it is to have her medication on campus.
Rob Roth, Fox News.
The Broadway show Come From Away tells the true story of 38 planes diverted to a small town on an island off the coast of Canada in the immediate aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, and the people that banded together to host nearly 7,000 strangers.
The people who were stranded there were welcomed in with open arms, were given everything, made lifelong friendships.
The musical balances being both positive and upbeat while also being respectful of the tragedy. A tricky thing to do and something the show's authors say was important.
We lived in New York over 9/11, and so we were really respectful that this show was speaking to that experience. And at the same time, our experience in Newfoundland was not only tears but laughter, and we tried to communicate that on stage.
It's a story that's connecting with audiences, many of whom aren't sure what to expect from a musical with 9/11 at the center.
I think people want to be reminded that we're all good at heart, and the message of kindness and the practice of kindness is something we really need right now.
To have a story about how good people can be, about how kind they can be, I think is shocking in a positive way.
And as it plays across the country and in Canada, that message resonates with the audience because everyone has a memory and a story from that day.
This is a moment that brought us together, and the show reminds us that no matter where you're from, we can come together again.
The show's creators, cast, and crew say they mark the anniversary by performing random acts of kindness throughout the day, saying they want to remember not just what we lost, but also the good we can do for each other, even on our darkest days. In New York, Jackie Heinrich, Fox News.
Not only a remembrance, but we're also here to have fun.
Given the aftermath of everything, it seems like the community's banding together.
Because it's the fall, it's a new school year, and it's homecoming.
We're all excited to go see Douglas hopefully win.
This is Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School's first football game since that day, the day they lost 15 friends, a teacher, and a coach. Before the game, a prayer, the field ready. The Stoneman Douglas Eagle, though, now bears the number 17. Under the lights, it was a high school football game, the Eagles taking on the South Broward Bulldogs. Missing, however, assistant coach Aaron Feist, who not only walked these sidelines but played on this field. With the number 17 always there and the term MSD Strong now woven into the fiber that binds these students together, these high school kids are ready to be kids once again.
I think today is just a really great day. Deep cleaning their school buses, Jordan's school district is taking no chances after being hit with the latest outbreak of norovirus.
It spreads quickly, and especially among little kids. You know, they're in close proximity to each other in our schools.
Saying 153 students were marked absent today out of 1,000 in one of their schools. And in the other, more than 90 of their 649 kids gone.
Those are high numbers because normally, on average, on a given day, we have 4.5 students out.
Not sure if it was the early out on Friday or the confirmed cases of norovirus keeping their students at home.
Little kids are like walking petri dishes. It's a bad case of the stomach bug is what it is.
And this bad case has been spreading. First reported in the Alpine School District at Riverview Elementary, Saratoga Shores Elementary, Mountain Trails Elementary, Brookhaven Elementary, Black Ridge Elementary, Frontier Middle School, as well as the two in the Jordan School District. Fox Hollow Elementary and Mountain Shadow Elementary, saying some of their teachers have called in sick too. Talking with Cindy Burnett, an epidemiologist with the State Health Department, says that these are the symptoms to watch for.
Vomiting, diarrhea, sometimes people have fever and muscle aches with it as well.
Meanwhile, here at Jordan School District, they say they've been doing their best to keep their classes clean and their buses too.
We really do want to give credit to our custodians who, they bear the brunt of the cleanup in these situations.
In West Jordan, Aaron Cox, Fox 13 News, Utah.
Business at Slim's Place on Anna Maria Island is starting to pick back up.
It was really slow last week, and people are starting to come back. Not at any great pace, but we're hoping, because September is usually a pretty slow month anyway.
The restaurant and bar has suffered for weeks as red tide wreaked havoc along beaches like Anna Maria Island. But a new report out by the FWC is showing red tide effects lessening. The orange, yellow, and white dots on this map showing low, medium, and even very low levels of red tide cells in Manatee County. And in Sarasota County, there's only one area of high levels of red tide cells marked by this red dot.
We've seen less of the adverse impacts from the aerosol and from the dead fish along the beaches, but that's been pretty well because the winds have been blowing offshore.
As Dr. Richard Pierce with Mote Marine Laboratory explains, high winds from Tropical Storm Gordon helped lessen the red tide effects along with the heavy rain.
Because we're getting so much rain, maybe that will have an adverse effect on the organism because it can't take a lot of low salinity water. So as the low salinity water gets into the bays and estuaries, that would also inhibit its growth.
Slim's Place is hoping the latest numbers on red tide cells encourage customers to return to the beach.
We're hoping that everybody comes back and starts partying and living in paradise, partying in paradise again.
In Manatee County, Jordan Bowen, Fox 13 News.
I'm a recovering addict. Found out that I was pregnant and I wanted to go to rehab and get clean for my daughter.
For 21-year-old Brianna, unfortunately, the inspiration to turn her life around, it met an immediate and tragic end.
She lived for 2 hours and then she passed away.
Most young people expect that they're going to have to deal with the costs associated with burying an older loved one. But when you're talking about burying a child, your child, that's something that none of us expect to do.
The nurses and my mom called around and found Trish, and she helped me. I was able to get her own grave.
Trish is Patricia Quinn, and helping people like Brianna was inspired by things that she saw in her daily business life.
My husband and I had a funeral home in an economically challenged area of the city, and we were quite often being asked for help.
Seeing parents lose their children for any reason is hard, but not being able to give them a proper burial, that was too much for Trish.
No matter what their financial situation is, the point where someone loses a child, they may not be able to come up with that kind of money right then and there.
And that's what led her to start Final Farewell. They pay the costs associated with funerals and burials, and it's making a huge difference.
It's 12 years that I've been doing it in over 500 families. All across the United States.
But Trish needs our help. She can only help as many families as Final Farewell can afford through donations, and apparently it's hard getting people to understand the importance of giving.
Nobody wants to believe a child passes. That's the furthest thing from their mind. They want to give to the cure for leukemia. Of course, everybody does. But if people weren't dying, we wouldn't need a cure.
Let's go back to Brianna. Although doctors say her baby Serenity's death had nothing to do with her previous drug use, having a place to remember her, that inspires.
She was everything to me, and I wish that she was here, but she's my motivation to stay clean. I want to continue to do that for her every day.
And for Trish, knowing that she helped, that's what inspires.
I just love doing it. I don't know why.
Bill Anderson, Fox News.
All right, guys, we are back in live inside the newsroom here at Fox 5 DC. Thanks for joining us on YouTube. Maybe you're on our website here. Welcome to the stream. We are committed to making sure you stay up to date on Hurricane Florence, now a Category 3 storm that is affecting sort of the lower southeast portion of the nation. And we're going to have our meteorologists come in and join me in just a little bit to give the update on that storm. We're finding out now that we're going to be getting some more information, some crucial information around the 2 o'clock Eastern time hour. But right now we have this cool live satellite to show you, and it is live, so it is continuing to update here on what the storm looks like and how it's going to be rolling through and affecting this area. But before we get to some more live shots of some of the beaches down there, we do have a live camera courtesy of Earth Cam down in Wrightsville, North Carolina, as well as one in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So you're probably familiar with those two areas that are prime targets for storms like these. We're going to make sure we show you those cams when we have them up. But right now, no new real information. You can take a look at this graphic here, though, to explain a little bit more about where that storm is going and what type of wind it's going to be picking up as it kind of moves into that southeast corridor area of the country. And again, more details and more knowledge from our meteorologist when he comes over and can give me that information. But it's really not until the next couple hours that we're going to find out more on this storm. If anything, note that this storm is likely to make landfall between Thursday and Friday. So it's later on in the week. It's not now, but it is quite an urgent matter down there. And so we want to keep you guys in the loop of that. But we did tell you, and you can see on our headline of our stream here, that we're waiting right here for the family of the man who was walked into in his apartment in Dallas, that horrible, tragic, really bizarre case. And his family is going to be speaking out there at that podium in Dallas. This is outside the district attorney's office in Dallas. So stay here for that. That's coming up next. And we have something popping up here on our other live camera. This is the Federalist Society here in Washington, and we're not quite sure who's going to be speaking, but when we find out and we stream that for you, we'll get some more information for you. So a couple cool live things going on here in DC, and some other stories to report to you. So we'll bring whatever's live first. That takes precedence here in our live stream, and let us know what you think. Any questions or comments, forward them in the chat, and we'll talk to you soon, guys.
Wild West in social media is coming to an end.
That was the stark message senators had for the leaders of Facebook and Twitter as they testified on Capitol Hill yesterday. The hearing highlighted a major issue tech companies are grappling with behind the scenes: social media addiction. Developers have long sought to harness universal human needs for connection, communication, and approval in order to get people engaged on their platforms. Now Capitol Hill's tuning in too.
People are affected by the information your platforms channel to them. That channeling isn't passive or random. It's a function of brilliant algorithms and an incentive structure that prizes engagement.
Experts are now rallying around the idea that addiction to social media poses a real and pervasive danger to billions of users worldwide.
If they're designed to be addictive to make the companies more money, then people are going to spend more and more time on them. People who are on their phones 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, that is linked to unhappiness, depression, even risk factors for suicide, particularly among teens.
Aaron Greenspan, known as the founder of the original Facebook, alleges the platform's as addictive as tobacco, telling the Daily Telegraph, quote, "Facebook's addictive qualities may not kill anyone directly as cigarettes do every day, but it's now established that the site has led to countless deaths." Though these accusations may sound extreme, there's emerging evidence to support them. The Pew Research Center has released new survey results that suggest many Facebook users share concerns about its addictive properties and are taking matters into their own hands. Among its findings, 42% of Facebook users say they've taken a break from the platform for several weeks or more, and 26% say they've gone a step further and deleted the Facebook app from their cell phone entirely. But Facebook, pushing back in a statement, says, "We change newsfeed with people's well-being in mind. We'll continue to invest heavily in tools and technology to protect our community. This will always be more important than maximizing profits."
Medical professionals emphasize that young people are especially susceptible to social media addiction and its attendant mental health effects. They say Washington regulators should focus on enforcing existing laws that prohibit children under 13 from creating social media accounts of their own. In Washington, Jillian Turner, Fox News.
Mark, when this video surfaced online yesterday evening, it was shared thousands of times, but without much context. Today's released court documents giving us the full report, as noted by the officer, who says he pulled over this woman because she was driving with a suspended license, and when he tried to arrest her, she resisted. A struggle, a strike, a takedown, and a drag across the pavement. An incident all caught on camera between a Goodyear officer and a woman now identified as Renee Armenta. What started as a traffic stop, the officer reporting he was pulling Armenta over for driving with a suspended license, quickly escalating.
It was like within 45 seconds.
Mariah Ayers, the one who captured the encounter.
I was like, did that really just happen right now?
How exactly did it end like this? The officer says he ran the car's registration prior to pulling Armenta over and learned she had a suspended license. After pulling her over near Van Buren and Dysart, the officer says Armenta confirmed her identity and was asked to step out of the car. According to court documents, Armenta did not comply, and when she was finally out of the car, continued to pull back from the officer. The officer noting she put her right arm behind her back, and that is when he felt an imminent threat, reacting like this, pulling her, striking her in the face, then dragging her from the car.
I just feel like it was eye-opening, like I didn't think it would happen.
1 count of possession of marijuana, 1 count of possession of drug paraphernalia, 1 count of resisting arrest. Those are all Class 6 felonies.
These charges coming after the officer says he found marijuana in Armenta's bag and a meth smoking pipe in the glove box. Court documents noting Armenta admitted to driving with a suspended license, but did so because of a, quote, emergency. Armenta also telling detectives she pulled away because she initially did not know why she was being stopped. Stefania Coley, Fox 10 News.
It's out of the kitchen and onto the streets. Domino's Pizza descends on Hamtramck to save carry-out pizza 1 pothole at a time.
Potholes is bad, you know. I say fill them up if they need to be filled up.
Domino's launched its Paving the Way for Pizza campaign back in June after a brutal winter did a number on our roads. Customers were given an opportunity to nominate their hometown, and now it's paying off for the people of Hamtramck.
I think this is great because I'm kind of tired of potholes, messing up tires, and you're going down the street and it's hitting them. So this is really great. And then I love Domino's Pizza, so I think this is awesome.
Hamtramck is about 2 square miles in size. Domino's plans to fill the potholes on every single street, even the alleyways.
I'm a resident of Hamtramck. I work in Hamtramck. I love Hamtramck. And we're in the streets together. We're paving for pizza. As Domino's says, yes, we did.
Since the program launched, Domino's received more than 137,000 nominations from more than 15,000 different zip codes in all 50 states. One thing is for sure, they definitely have fans in Hamtramck.
They are pretty good pizza, you know, and the price is pretty reasonable, too.
I would hope that they would call Domino's and, you know, support those guys like they're supporting us.
And here's the stamp of approval as Domino's leaves its mark on the city and continues to make carry-out safe for pizza lovers.
"30-year-old Dallas police officer Amber Geiger arrested Sunday night in the fatal shooting of her neighbor, Botham Jean. Geiger was taken into custody on a manslaughter warrant and bonded out of jail a short time later. Geiger officially charged with his death.
Botham wanted all of us to unite.
According to police, Geiger was returning from work last Thursday, still in uniform when she shot Jean at his apartment, reportedly 1 floor above hers. Geiger told responding officers she mistook John's apartment for her own. Lawyers for John's family and the community were calling for Geiger's arrest since the shooting happened, saying her freedom showed favorable treatment for the officer.
This police officer should not be given any preferential treatment.
Over the weekend, people remembered the 26-year-old St. Lucia native as a well-known member of the Dallas community, and according to Mayor Rawlings, it's a great loss for the city.
Not only
has he lost his life, but we've lost a potential leader for this city for decades to come.
Geiger is a 4-year veteran of the police force. Many questions about the fatal incident remain.
He went to his grave never knowing why the police officer came into his apartment and shot him.
The Texas Rangers have taken over the investigation. They're trying to determine whether drugs or alcohol may have been involved, or if fatigue was a factor. In New York, Mike Cantor, Fox News.
And continuing on in that same vein, guys, we are, of course, still waiting on the family of that man to speak out about that incident. A horrible, very tragic, and really just bizarre incident that happened in Dallas. And here's the bump shot of that right now, live outside the district attorney's office. We're waiting on them to speak on this. And it looks like some journalists are kind of just getting ready for it. So not quite sure how how rapidly approaching this press conference is. But we have the shot up, and we're going to be ready to bring it to you live. But meanwhile, over in downtown D.C., back here, National Security Advisor John Bolton is speaking at the Mayflower Hotel, that historical hotel down in downtown DuPont here in D.C., and he's speaking to the Federalist Society about constitutionalism and sovereignty from international threats. Might be something interesting to peep into once that gets started. We're going to show you that. And on our trend of hurricanes, we know now that Hurricane Florence is a Category 4 storm, winds still at 130 miles an hour, and no real official update until later in the afternoon. We're finding out that we might not find out some more unique information until about 2 p.m. Eastern time, when we'll have Gary McGrady sit down with us and chat a little bit more about this storm and what to expect in the southeast. So with that, guys, we're going to just go over to some more stories and show you what's been going on, and then jump right into those press conferences when they start. So awaiting those coming up next, guys.
You know what? They got to work to try to do this as real quick as we can. We got mom, we got sister, we got friend. That's what I was going to say. Even we try to do it, they're thinking about it. Got to stay
All right, good morning. Thank you for your patience. Lee Merritt, L-E-E-M-E-R-R-I-T-T, one of the attorneys for the family. You're going to hear shortly from the Prime Minister of St. Lucia's, Alain Chastanet. And after that, you will hear from the other attorneys for the family, myself, Attorney Ben Crump, Attorney Darrell Washington, and then you'll hear from Miss Allison Jean, the mother for Mr. Botham Jean, and she'll be accompanied by their family, but they won't be making any statements. Afterwards, the attorneys will come forward, make a brief statement, and answer some questions, okay? With that said, without any further delay, you'll hear from the Prime Minister. Thank you.
Thank you. Allen is A-L-L-E-N. Chastanet is C-H-A-S-T-A-N-E-T. I'm the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. I would like to have come to Dallas under different circumstances, but I'm here today to give my solidarity with Allison, who is a lady that I've known for many, many, many years. She's been a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Transportation, the Ministry of Education, and has been an outstanding citizen of St. Lucia. And I know a lot of people say that about their children, but Allison did an incredible job of raising her son. And we all in St. Lucia are extremely proud of both of them and what he represented and how he represented St. Lucia. I have to say that in St. Lucia, there are really two very, very strong emotions. One clearly of great sadness. Sadness that a young man lost his life at such a young age. Sadness knowing how close Allison and their family were to Logan. The other emotion is one of anger. To think that a young man would be in his apartment, and the possibility could be that somebody could come to his door and he ends up being dead. I know for the family, there are also mixed emotions. One, wanting to try to heal and to be emotional about the loss of their son, but then also being forced into this situation of having to want justice. And I don't think any of us would truly understand the conflict of those emotions. Because can you ever think that you are praying for your son as much as you should, but at the same time having to fight to see his justice? And I'm here to say that we're going to support the family. I also want to thank the mayor, Mike Rollins, for reaching out to me and the empathy that he showed. And I was very encouraged by the words of the DA at the press conference this morning. And certainly my ambassador, who is here, will be working behind the scenes to give the family as much support as we possibly can. I'm really hoping that the justice system takes the right course and that Botham's name is redeemed.
You're not going to hear from Botham's mom, Allison. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, we're going to save her for last. I misstated the order. We are encouraged by the charges going forward on behalf of the family. However, we want to maintain our focus on the long haul. It is very difficult anywhere in the United States to see an officer convicted. And we believe that a conviction is proper here. We just don't know enough about the facts. And the DA mentioned that we left her office not satisfied yesterday. She said she wasn't sure why. We weren't satisfied for a number of reasons. Number one, when we left the office, it was 3 days after Botham had been killed, and his killer, who was known to the DA at the time, was not in handcuffs. Whether that was the responsibility of the DA's office or the Rangers or the Dallas Police Department, it mattered not to this family. What mattered was that person was able to leave Botham's home, return to her home, and not face any consequence for 3 days after he was killed. And that is extremely problematic for this family. That shows an extreme deference. We were encouraged to see the mayor here and other representatives from the city, but we are of the position that the city has to share not only in our cries for justice, but they have to take responsibility for their share and accountability as well. When Amber, or Officer Geiger, entered this apartment, she entered in her uniform. She was operating under the color of state authority. She used her service pistol to kill Botham Jean. She used her training, and we would expect our law enforcement officers in the city of Dallas to be able to diffuse a situation, to gather facts, really simple facts, starting with the fact that she was on the wrong floor, that she came to the wrong door, that she was standing on a big red carpet, or any number of facts that should have indicated to her that she was not at her residence. If the prevailing narrative is true, and again, it's clouded in a shroud of mystery, but if the prevailing narrative is true and that she entered the wrong home and found a stranger there, why was she so quick to rely on deadly force is a great mystery to us. So there's so much more information that we demand come forward, and so many more people held accountable. In addition to Amber, we want to know what went wrong in her training, what went wrong in her before she clocked out, that had her so disoriented, if that is in fact the case, that she couldn't make her home from another person's home. And so the city has repeated this call that they want to be as transparent as possible. I don't know that they can. They've said transparency was a priority to them for a number of times. But this is this family's second trip to this office, and they still leave with no more transparency, no more clarity about what happened at that door. We're not rushing them to release that information. We want them to gather as much information as they can in order to present to the grand jury. But we really feel like the word transparency ought to be dropped from their lexicon as they move forward with their investigation, because the promise of transparency to this family has been a blank check. Thank you.
It's very clear to us that the very foundation of the justice system in America required for the killer of Botham Jean to be arrested. Think about it. What terrible precedents would this have set had she not been arrested? People could just say, I went to the wrong apartment, I thought it was my apartment, and I killed the innocent person, because that would be the precedence had an arrest not been made in this case. And this is a shocking scenario to everybody. The way Botham was killed was not just a shock to the family, but it was astonishing to most sensible people, not just in America, but around the world, because he was from the island nation of St. Lucia. So this is an international incident, not just a local incident. When people put it in context and they are watching, is the American justice system going to treat Botham Jean and his family like they would treat the officer's family had this situation being reversed? And that's what is the crux of the matter here. Black people in America have been killed by police in some of the most unbelievable manners. You know, driving while black in our cars. Black people have been killed walking while black in our neighborhoods. And now here we are being killed living while black when we're in our apartments. At some point we have to say that we have an issue here, and we have to have the legacy of Botham be that we don't want to keep losing our children to the people who are supposed to protect and serve us. That's what this is about, trying to have his legacy mean more than just he has been taken away from us in an unbelievable circumstance, but what is going to be done about it in justice in this case, and how is American society going to learn from this? How does this become a teachable moment for all of America? And in conclusion, as I look at his little brother, Grant, I think about other young people of color when they have interactions with law enforcement authorities. We want them to not accelerate the confrontation. We want them to de-escalate the confrontation. So this police officer, who I understand was trained, supervised, prepared, when she had this confrontation with Botham, why did she use deadly force? It makes no sense. It didn't make sense when they first got the news, and it doesn't make sense today. We expect more from the people who we give the right to use deadly force. Police officers have the right to use deadly force. If anybody should be able to discern a situation, it should be the police. You'll hear from Attorney Darrell Washington before you hear from Miss Allison Jones.
Thank you, man. You know, we were just here roughly a week ago, and we were talking about Jordan Edwards, and we were talking about the conviction of Ron Oliver. And I talked to his parents, and one of the things I said is maybe we can finally get some rest. Maybe this is not going to happen anymore. And a few days later, we saw a truck ram into Fox 4 news station. And we saw a white guy out of control get out of his truck, reach into his pocket, and pull out a cell phone. And the officers didn't use deadly force. No deadly force was used, and I said, you know what? Maybe Jordan's death is not in vain. Maybe officers are now going to take one extra second before they decide to use deadly force. And now we're dealing with this situation here a week later. Perfect young man, just like Jordan Edwards was. All the stories that we heard about this young man, they're all the truth. He had a future before him, but we have one issue. And the city of Dallas needs to realize this, is that we have a training issue when it comes for officers dealing with unarmed African Americans. For some reason, there is a tendency to pull that trigger very fast and to answer questions later. There is no doubt in our minds that this officer should have been arrested immediately. What was the transparency that they talk about? The chief of police say, well, we want to bring the Texas Rangers in here to have transparency. Transparency to who? You arrested the officer, so you were being transparent to the public. Was the transparency that they were talking about transparent to the Dallas Police Union or the police officers to make it seem that we're not going to prosecute police officers? So we know that this officer was in full uniform. We know that this officer, we have heard a number of statements that this officer felt that her apartment was being burglarized. And we know that there's a very thin line between off-duty and on-duty. And if this officer felt that her apartment was being burglarized, that officer was then operating on duty. So this is not a situation that we're dealing with an off-duty police officer. It's our belief that this officer was on duty. And it's ironic here in Dallas, we know that officers are given 72 hours before they have to give a statement. So it's ironic that this officer was arrested about 72 hours after the death. So this shouldn't be happening, and the family should not be here talking about this. You know, the district attorney, Faye Johnson, said something that resonated with all of us for a very long time. She's saying, and I will never forget it, if a wife loses her husband, she's considered to be a widow. If kids lose their parents, they're considered to be orphans. But if a parent loses their kid, there's no definition in Webster that can describe the pain that this family is dealing with. And this is what this family is dealing with. They did not want to be in Dallas, Texas. There's a number of places they would want to be. They would not want to be in Dallas, Texas under this circumstances. So we hope that we can get justice here in Dallas.
Good morning, everyone. Botham was my middle child, and therefore I stand in the middle today to represent Botham. I want to thank the community for standing with me. I want to thank the country of St. Lucia. I want to thank the Caribbean and the world for standing with all of us. Unfortunately, his dad has not come here yet, but what we want, I'm not satisfied that we have all the answers. And the number one answer that I want is, what happened? I have asked too many questions and I've been told that there are no answers yet. I'm looking forward to all of the powers that be to come up with the answers to make me more satisfied that they are doing what is in the best interest of getting justice for both of them. Thank you very much.
All right, we will field just a few questions and then we're going to get out of here.
A question for Daryl. You just went through the Roy Oliver thing, as you said. You listened to what was up there. You have a pretty good relationship, it seemed, with the district attorney's office. Are you satisfied by the time this exits the grand jury that you're going to have full answers, full disclosure, having worked with them?
Having worked with the district attorney's office in the past, I can say that I feel confident with the team that's here at the district attorney's office, and they're going to look into every aspect of this investigation. They're going to do the right thing.
Mr. Mayor, everybody talks about clarity and transparency. You all met with the district attorney. They met with the Texas Rangers. Is there any clarity as to what Ms. Jean has simply asked for? What happened?
No. And I believe that's something that the district attorney's office, in terms of transparency and clarity, could offer this family. I don't think it's something that belongs in the public domain necessarily, but that we would love to see them be more forthcoming with this family, and we would love to see them be more thorough in their investigation, because the questions, even the questions that this family asked her directly, they were honestly some pretty common sense questions, and they didn't have answers for even those.
Do you know if there was body cam video since she pulled her weapon? She was still in uniform, to your knowledge?
No, when she clocked out, when she checked out, she left her body cam down at the station, which I understand is standard procedure.
Lee, yesterday we met out here, it was like 7 o'clock, right? This officer was arrested at 6:37. I'm just confused as to how y'all didn't know that there was an arrest warrant if y'all were just with the DA at the time. How did that happen?
Yeah, again, when we talk about transparency, that's not something that the DA was willing to share with his family. Not even the fact that they were seeking an arrest warrant. So, again, it's in our opinion, a hypocritical cry for transparency when they're not giving us basic information.
Well, you know, the officer was taser qualified.
One more time, sir.
What have you been told about the narrative of what happened? Unless you said some kind of inside as to what happened.
Unfortunately, they have told us nothing about what they believe is the narrative or what they know to be fact. Sir?
You know if the officer is taser qualified?
I don't know that.
Lee, I know you mentioned in your press release yesterday the idea of new evidence. Is any of that surface anything you can talk about beyond what was already in the public record?
Yeah, so again, we encourage the public. This to happen 4 days ago now, and so there's a lot of evidence out there, and unfortunately, there's misinformation floating around that needs to be dealt with, and there's additional evidence that needs to find its way into this investigation. The Rangers have failed to gather some of that evidence that we were able to present to the district attorney's office yesterday, and again, we weren't just doing it just for show. We honestly thought because of the availability of this evidence and the relative ease in which we gathered it, that they already had it. They didn't, and that's problematic. And so we don't want to compromise their investigation. We won't go into the details of it, but we are calling for a more thorough investigation and more diligent work.
Lee, do you feel that she wasn't arrested until almost 3 days? Do you feel this officer is getting special treatment?
This officer is absolutely getting special treatment. She's being treated like a police officer in the United States when they commit a crime. And so it's not special in that regard. It's common, but it's something that should not happen. There's no way that she should have left the scene of this incident, even under her narrative. Now, the narrative, which is the prevailing narrative, and I haven't heard statements directly from her, that she found herself in the wrong person's apartment and shot them to death, is at least probable cause for manslaughter. And so she shouldn't have left that scene without being in handcuffs that day.
Can you confirm whether there's a report out there that says, okay, she got there's this red mat that Miss Allison had bought, so That, I mean, it was a red mat. Nobody has a red mat around there. She still went in somehow. That the door was unlocked. She went in. She saw that it was dark. There was a silhouette there. She thought it was an intruder, and she shot. Is that what y'all are understanding to be the case?
I understand that to be the prevailing narrative. I don't know if that's the case or not. All right, you guys, we thank you for your
Question for
time.
the Prime Minister, please. Just a quick question, sir. Step on up. Do the people of your island consider the United States safe?
I mean, unfortunately, the news coming out of the States in recent years has not been very, very good. And certainly with the immigration debate that's taking place in the States, I think it's understandable that a lot of immigrants are fearful of America. But I don't want to really cloud that with this issue. This issue is really about family.
Mr. Crump, does Miss Allison want a murder charge to come of this?
The family want them to be held. The family wants to kill of their child to be held to the full extent of the law. Thank you.
Is that a murder charge, Miss Allison?
Wait a minute. I got it. Never mind.
Hang on.
All right, y'all. Well, we're back in the newsroom here, and I'm joined by Sam, one of our web producers, social media web producer.
I do everything.
Working on some stories this weekend, and hey, what a horrible kind of situation. That is a tough case. It's a very controversial case.
That broke late yesterday, and everybody's been kind of following that ever since. The news kind of trickled because it was definitely like more focused, being in Texas, but obviously, any kind of shooting involved with a police officer has been really an intense subject.
Absolutely.
And this family obviously is very upset by the whole situation. But
I know you guys had some comments on the chat, so do let them come as they will. But I want to talk to Sam, kind of switch gears about some of the stuff that popped, including the story, but other things that were just really big talkers and exciting things from this weekend. And one of them, not the least of which at all, is the Serena Williams U.S. Open.
Yeah.
You guys probably heard about that. So here's the picture, and this is it describes it in itself right there. But Sam, you were here when this kind of all happened.
Yeah, it broke on Saturday evening. This was like the 13th game of the U.S. Women's Open, and Serena obviously has the
face and name of
she's Serena. She has the reputation that she has for a reason. And things kind of went off, and there's been a lot of different sides of how things went. Bottom line is Serena lost. She was kind of charged, like 3 different points for different violations, because you're supposed to have a certain decorum and a certain demeanor when you're playing. And she made a few technical fouls that she was, faulted by the refs, and while that happened, she got into an argument with one of them for calling her out on it, and that caused a whole other thing, and so she lost. And then at the very end, the woman that she was playing against, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her first name. Naomi Osaka. Yeah, they were booing at her. They were, obviously all the fans were there to see Serena win, and they were upset that she didn't win, but everybody's been just like, that was such bad, viewership. If you're going to be a good viewer of a sports event, you are a part of the game itself. The fans are obviously a huge part of the game, no matter what sport it is. And there was kind of like a shame on you for booing at this other woman for winning. So the two of them were huddled together. There was a commentator asking them questions, and they're, Serena kind of like, she got herself together. She was upset, but she didn't want to fault this other girl for beating her. Her beef was more with the umpire rather than this woman that she was playing, you know, they were just doing, you know, they were just competing. They were just there against each other for that, and you know, it wasn't any hard feelings. But you know, Naomi ended up apologizing for having won, which I thought was a really strange moment. You know, like she beat this woman that she's idolized for years. I forget how old she is, but you know,
Younger,
Serena,
20 or something.
yeah, Serena's been around for so long that, you know, anyone who's in the sport, you know, or in their 20s, you know, has to idolize Serena Williams.
And interestingly, the story became less about the winning, right, and it became more about that third violation that was sort of put on Serena Williams, which was a verbal abuse against the umpire kind of call. And the story becomes really that Serena later said that was a sexist thing, that ump would never have done that to a male player, but had sort of called it out on her.
Right, yeah.
So it kind of became that and less about the win, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of people giving their opinion on different sides, like, you know, that Serena lost, that she was being a bad sport, you know, that she wasn't being gracious to her competitor, to Naomi, but a lot of people were like, look, a lot of people in the sport get mad, you know, it's a very intense sport, and if you look at some of the men who are like at the pinnacle, like, you know, John McEnroe was a huge diva for tennis. I'm not even a huge tennis follower, but I know, like, he was known for throwing, you know, tantrums, so to speak, during, you know, matches, throwing his racket, and, you know, you're not supposed to do those things, but, you know, it depends on whether or not an umpire's gonna, you know, turn the other cheek and let it go versus saying, hey, I saw you do that. She kind of was just like, hey, as a woman of color, there's a lot of things I've faced that, you know, kind of goes beyond what you see every day, and, you know, she felt that she was being treated unfairly and harshly. So yeah, I think it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, you have the women's side of things. Women athletes face a lot in general, and then, you know, for Serena as a person of color as well, so that's a twofold thing. And she brought that up. A lot of people said that was BS, but you know, it's her experience. It's what she says is, you know, obviously, you know, I don't see her, like, you know, trying to fight it, but I mean, she's won so many. I mean, obviously she deserves to win what she thinks that she's deserved to win, but at the same time, it's, yeah, I don't know, there were so many different pieces involved here. I know I'm not even and everybody in the newsroom was like, whoa, what's happening? Like,
and I'm telling you, those hot mic moments that kind of
the mic moments between her and Naomi Osaka was like, we were very, like, because, you know, obviously it was a big blow up, and oh my God, Serena lost. Oh my God, this other girl beat her, and she was just like, you know, and the fact that, I don't know, I was just very taken aback by this woman who apologized for beating Serena Williams. Like, it's just such an interesting thing that, you know, she's come so far. She's obviously, you know, Serena's at her game, but, you know, you have to be at a certain ability to even get to that level. So she's, you know, for all intents and purposes, really good. But, you know, just I'm sure she didn't expect to win, and in that manner, it was kind of like an awkward, you know, for Serena to have those technical foul issues and then to win that way. I guess she kind of felt awkward about the whole thing, but I don't think she should have apologized for winning, you know, like, but I also feel like that women are kind of not expected to apologize, but I feel like, you know, it's kind of cultured, it's kind of put in within a lot of women to, like, you bump into somebody and say, I'm sorry, or, you know.
Yeah, and so, totally switching gears too, another big story was the weather during the weekend, and we're going to talk more about that. As we've been talking about all day, and we're going to continue talking about.
And
here it is. Yeah, we are going to continue, as we mentioned earlier, if you are just joining us, so some new information is that we're going to update y'all on both YouTube and Facebook when we have a new update, which is sort of going to be mid-afternoon. The official update from Weather Service won't be till about 5 p.m. Eastern time. But here you go. Here's your map of where it is.
So, yeah, one thing that we've been definitely looking at is how far it is, the strength of it. And one thing that Gary McGrady had told me yesterday that I didn't realize is that Florence was a tropical storm, died out, and then gained so much strength it went back to being a tropical storm and into a hurricane. So, like, even though a certain hurricane can, like, become very weak, if it grows back again, it can still maintain its name and its, you know, its path.
Oh, okay.
some hurricanes can have longer lives than others. It's not necessarily common for a hurricane to have a longer life like this, but I guess it depends on the currents and the pressure and all that stuff. So that's really interesting. The other thing is that we've been seeing a lot of rain and strong winds here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, but these are not related to Florence. This is related to another system that was coming through the area just by, I mean, not by coincidence, but you know, it is the season for that. But a lot of the rain and flooding we've been seeing in our area, we've been covering a lot on Fox 5, is due to remnants from Tropical Storm Gordon, not Florence. Florence hasn't really done much for our area as of yet. So just to keep those things separate has been like, you know.
The brunt of it we're looking at, according to the meteorologists here, is the two Carolinas. So they'll have more.
And then southern Virginia. Virginia is also under a state of emergency.
The state of Virginia also under a state of emergency. But it looks like I think most of it primed to hit the Carolinas later this week, Thursday and Friday. And we'll have to see.
It just depends on the path, and you know. But it was just named a Cat 4. They just said, and Tucker Barnes had tweeted that some of the hurricane trackers, the guys with the little planes that go into the hurricane, they were tracking it. I think it was like 150 miles an hour.
Winds.
I think we have to.
Right now we have
pull that up.
130 mile an hour winds, but if it, I guess as it grows, it'll pick up more speed and then eventually hit. So.
I'm gonna see what Tucker said. Okay, sorry, 145 miles per hour near the center of, the hurricane.
Oh, neat. Wow.
So definitely something we're going to be keeping tabs on, and once Molly's out for the day, I'll be in.
So we'll continue on here with our live stream, guys, with live news. We have John Bolton right now speaking at the Mayflower Hotel. Kind of cool. Downtown historic hotel in D.C. He's talking about constitutionalism to the Federalist Society. Seems like a neat live event. And then one other video that just popped up on our live kind of router, and we're going to see what that is. So a lot of different things happening in D.C. today.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam, for the update from the weekend.
No problem.
And we'll see you back here to do a little more weather in the afternoon.
Yes.
Okay.
We will be. Thanks for
Sam.
watching, everybody.
All right, guys, let's go over to the Mayflower.
Trump administration will not keep the office open when the Palestinians refuse to take steps to start direct and meaningful negotiations with Israel. The United States supports a direct and robust peace process, and we will not allow the ICC or any other organization to constrain Israel's right to self-defense. In sum, an international court so deeply divisive and so deeply flawed can have no legitimate claim to jurisdiction over the citizens of sovereign nations that have rejected its authority. Americans can rest assured that the United States will not provide any form of legitimacy or support to the court. We will not cooperate, engage, fund, or assist the ICC in any way. The President will not allow American citizens to be prosecuted by foreign bureaucrats, and he will not allow other nations to dictate our means of self-defense. We take this position not because we oppose justice for the victims of atrocities, but because we believe that perpetrators should face legitimate, effective, and accountable prosecution for their crimes by sovereign national governments. In April of 2016, it was right here at the Mayflower Hotel that President Trump gave his first major foreign policy address during his campaign. At that time, candidate Trump promised that he would, quote, always put the interests of the American people and American security above all else. Today, it is fitting that we reassert this fundamental promise within these walls. This afternoon, we also make a new pledge to the American people. If the court comes after us, Israel, or other U.S. allies, we will not sit quietly. We will take the following steps, among others, in accordance with the American Service Members Protection Act and our other legal authorities. We will negotiate even more binding bilateral agreements to prohibit nations from surrendering U.S. persons to the ICC, and we will ensure that those we already have entered are honored by our counterpart governments. We will respond against the ICC and its personnel to the extent permitted by U.S. law. We will ban its judges and prosecutors from entering the United States. We will sanction their funds in the U.S. financial system, and we will prosecute them in the U.S. criminal system. We will do the same for any company or state that assists an ICC investigation of Americans. We will take note if any countries cooperate with ICC investigations of the United States and its allies, and we will remember that cooperation when setting U.S. foreign assistance, military assistance, and intelligence sharing levels. We will consider taking steps in the UN Security Council to constrain the court's sweeping powers, including ensuring that the ICC does not exercise jurisdiction over Americans and the nationals of our allies that have not ratified the Rome Statute. This administration will fight back to protect American constitutionalism, our sovereignty, and our citizens. No committee of foreign nations will tell us how to govern ourselves and defend our freedom. We will stand up for the U.S. Constitution abroad, just as we do at home. And as always, in every decision we make, we will put the interest of the American people first. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I hope that's clear to everybody. And now, as Jean said, I'd be happy to answer questions. I think in fairness to the Federalist Society, we're asking for members to take the floor first, somewhere, wherever the microphones are. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton, for your remarks. My question goes to this threat towards United States nationals by the International Criminal Court. And to this point, of course, the prosecutor has focused on persons alleged to be responsible for holding command responsibility over forces. And of course, as you know, in Afghanistan, the primary subject matter there is allegations of US nationals engaging in torture. But to what extent are you also concerned about this mode of liability of aiding and abetting crimes? Right? As you probably know, Charles Taylor was, for example, prosecuted by the UN Special Court for Sierra Leone for aiding and abetting crimes committed by rebels in Sierra Leone, not in Liberia. And of course, that raises the question of to what extent the ICC prosecution could also pursue US nationals for aiding and abetting conduct by the Afghan government, forces, other forces in Afghanistan. And you look to a case like Colombia, for example, where government forces are credibly alleged to have conducted crimes themselves. Of course, this brings into the purview of the ICC, for example, President Bush or President Obama, who as a matter of public policy provided material support to those.
I know there's a question in here somewhere. I'm sure it's coming.
Right. My question is, in all your remarks historically, you have considered US nationals generically, but not to the same extent, and then you're focused on Afghanistan, but there are all these conflicts around the world where the United States provides material supports to parties to those conflicts. Do you consider all those conflicts as well, or just what you hear coming out of the ICC as to what it's investigating?
I consider that all Americans operating in the service of the government are subject to American law, and I would put our record of maintaining adherence to the rule of law, to the rule of laws of armed conflict, and anything else that's applicable, I'd put it up in comparison to any other country in the world. The reason I focused on Afghanistan today is that is the case that's closest to the ICC for the first time formally opening an investigation. But to me, the issue here is the legitimacy of the court in second-guessing American decisions on our own rule of law and how we enforce it, and that applies whatever the venue is. Yes, ma'am.
Very welcome statement. We have heard over the years about warrants coming from the ICC against American leaders like Donald Rumsfeld and potentially Henry Kissinger and others. I wonder if you could bring us up to date a little on the status of where these things are. And also, is there anything in particular that is giving rise to making this statement today?
Right. Well, on the second point, as I said, the court itself has informed us that the prosecutor has requested the court, as part of the problem of not having separation of powers, to open a formal investigation. And we just wanted to make it clear to the ICC how we feel about that, which is not much. Especially after 8 years of the Obama administration. And so that really is what dictated the timing here. Although it's no coincidence tomorrow is September the 11th, which is how this conflict in Afghanistan for us started. You know, there was a time, and I think it's likely to come again, when a lot of countries thought that by adopting what they called universal jurisdiction statutes, they could prosecute pretty much anybody they wanted anytime. Belgium, for example, 20 or so years ago, passed such a universal jurisdiction statute, and they were going to serve a warrant, as I recall, on Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld when he showed up in Brussels for a NATO conference, and he reminded them that it wasn't graven in tablets of stone that NATO's headquarters was in Brussels, so if they tried it, see what would happen next. And amazingly, they rethought the idea and never served him with a warrant. But it's preposterous to think that these ideas, many of which are embodied in the Rome Statute and the ICC, can be allowed to take effect and bind Americans. And the ICC is a much prized institution by many people around the world who have larger aspirations in the field of global governance, which I think is, in time and time again, we find antithetical to the U.S. Constitution, and it's important to stand up and say it as clearly as we know how to do. That just speaking in secular terms here, I don't want to be heard to be speaking in religious terms, but in secular terms, on this earth, we don't recognize any authority higher than the U.S. Constitution. Sir.
Thanks for coming today, Ambassador. My question is, some of your critics, perhaps outside this room, might say this is typical of the Trump administration's skepticism about multilateral, multinational organizations, and this is just another example. I wonder if, given the chance, how would you articulate a conservative vision, and I've heard you do this before, of multinational organizations that do respect sovereignty, and what do those look like? Can you give us what that ideal is?
Yeah, well, I think collective defense organizations like NATO are an excellent example of an international organization that advances American interest, is consistent with American sovereignty, and strengthens America and its allies around the world. The difference is that there are some of these some institutions, some treaties that purport to create authorities and institutions outside of, beyond, above the Constitution, that put themselves in a kind of continuing revision outside the power of the Senate and the executive branch. I think that's particularly true of treaties that create judicial institutions. But many, many treaties that we see have conventions of state parties. They get together every 5 years. They pass declarations. They're, in effect, reinterpreting the treaties, putting new obligations on states' parties. Those never come back to the Senate for ratification. And I think this is something that frankly deserves more attention in the Senate than it gets. There's some institutions, the European Union in particular, that are founded on the notion that the nation state was a failure, and to create institutions above the nation state, that's what they've been in the process of doing. God bless them. It's their democratic choice to do it if that's what they want, and God bless the people of Great Britain who 2 years ago voted to get out of the European Union. Sir.
Yes, sir. My name is Cammy Butt. I'm with the Pakistani Spectator. And you mentioned about Osama bin Laden and Afghanistan, and given we have troops in Afghanistan, it's still important part of the US foreign policy. So do you, in the light of Afghanistan and our foreign policy object in Afghanistan, do you see that the election of this guy Imran Khan is an opportunity for America, or he is an obstacle, given he is the most pro-Western guy we could find in that part of the world? He was raised up partially in England. And if you think this is his election is an opportunity, then do you think that we should return Pakistan's $300 million that they have already spent helping us to control Afghan border? Thank you very much.
Well, you know, Secretary of State Pompeo was just in Pakistan. He didn't meet with Imran Khan, but he did meet with a number of his counterparts.
Oh, he met Imran Khan.
And he wanted to convey the message that that we hoped and expected that Pakistan would cooperate fully in the war against terrorism, which they had committed to do. It was before my time, but the Trump administration did not take the decision to cancel a substantial part of the military aid package to Pakistan lightly. It was done knowing full well that Pakistan is a nuclear weapons state, and that the risk that the government could fall into the hands of terrorists that would get control of those nuclear weapons was particularly serious. But it's a serious problem on the subcontinent, and I hope it's one that the new government of Pakistan addresses, because this terrorist threat is a threat, I think, to the majority opinion of the people in Pakistan, not to the terrorists and not to some of their supporters in the military and elsewhere. But it's a matter of extraordinary importance to the United States, and one that we hope the new government addresses. Ma'am.
Ambassador Bolton, thank you so much for being here. I'm president of the Federalist Society at my law student chapter, and first I just wanted to say thank you for upholding the justice system in this country that I hope to be a part of in just shy of 2 years. My question for you is, does the U.S. consider the previous convictions by the ICC to be invalid? And if so, do you believe there's a need to relitigate these issues in a legitimate sovereign nation?
Well, I think for those countries that decide they want to be a party to the Rome Statute, that's their choice. It's not a choice I'd agree with. I think whenever you're dealing with war crimes, crimes against humanity, and these kinds of atrocities, gross abuses of human rights, you have to look at the circumstances in each country to decide what the right way to proceed is. There are some countries that made conscious decisions that they would not follow a prosecutorial model. In South Africa, for example, after the fall of the apartheid government, Nelson Mandela, over the objections of many people in the African National Congress, thought that the best way to unite all of South Africa was through creating what they eventually called the Truth and Reconciliation process, so that there would be an incentive for people who committed gross abuses of human rights under apartheid to come forward, confess fully, and be absolved of the crimes they committed. You can debate the merits of that proposition. It's obviously a complex issue, but it was Mandela's feeling that that was better than prosecution. Many of the countries in Eastern and Central Europe, after being liberated from communism, tried to decide how they would bring their societies back from the misshapen form they had taken under communism, how they would approach this question of collaboration with communists and the communist network of informants through decades of communist rule. And most of them came to the conclusion that prosecution was not the right way. On the other hand, where you have circumstances where prosecution is warranted or deemed desirable, I think honestly it should be the government of the country in question that undertakes the prosecutions. Now, there are two objections to that. One is, well, they'll never do it and be fair. And my response to that is, you don't know that necessarily. You don't know when it might be appropriate to do it. And besides, if you take the decision out of their hands, as with the tribunals for the former Yugoslavia, you're interfering in the political maturation process of the people involved. You don't bring political maturity to people by taking hard decisions away from them. I think that, in fact, runs the risk of sowing the possibility of future discord. But ultimately, a mature society that's going to stay together has to be willing to make prosecutorial decisions. And the idea that a group of elders, wiser people, will make this decision for them around the world, wherever it might be, is not simply terribly patronizing. I think it's utterly unsound from a self-government point of view. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I read a couple days ago, there's unsubstantiated claims by the Russians that our government used white phosphorus in Syria, and there's also been other unsubstantiated claims that Syria has used chemical weapons. Some also claim that Saudi Arabia. And I think it's been pretty well acknowledged that Israel used white phosphorus, and who exactly would prosecute
Well, with respect to the second question, Jean Kirkpatrick was once asked why the United States didn't withdraw from the United Nations. And she paused for a moment and thought and said, because it's not worth the trouble.
Where we know what we're doing is showing our children, showing the entrepreneurs in California, showing people and skeptics throughout the nation that a state can lead. And while the Trump administration convinces people to buy dirtier power, California is going to continue to go in the opposite direction. With that, it's my pleasure to bring up Tom Steyer, who has a few words as well.
Thank you, Lorena. I want to talk very quickly about the two things that I think are going on today, which are truth and justice. As Lorena said, California is doing what actually needs to be done, which is making sure that by 2045, that the power sector is not contributing to climate change in any way. And that's a gigantic step forward by the 5th largest economy in the world. And it's a statement of really where our state stands in terms of world leadership. So let's talk for 1 second about our governor, Jerry Brown, in terms of world leadership. We're about to have the Global Climate Action Summit in California under his leadership. And so what this state is doing and what our governor has been doing is not just confined to what we're doing here, even though it's substantively incredibly important. Also from a leadership standpoint and a symbolic standpoint, what he's been doing and what he's been helping this entire state do is to reframe the way the world thinks about what's going on in terms of energy and climate, what's possible and what's necessary and what's just. The other word I want to talk about is environmental justice, because the difference in California from every other place I've ever been is we start when we talk about energy or climate or environment with the word justice. And in fact, what we see is this state has been using the energy policy not just to move towards clean energy, but also to redress the environmental injustice that has been foisted on our poor communities, our communities of color, for decades. And that is one of the reasons that, in fact, when you look at this stage, and in particular, when you look at the two people who led this bill, they are people from those communities. In fact, Kevin grew up in Barrio Logan, which is in Lorena's district, which is a poor community. And we've seen leadership from those communities, not just on this bill, but through the bills that I've been here for, where people have understood that to separate energy and justice is a gigantic mistake. We're talking about clean air and clean water for poor communities and communities of color, and we're talking about organized union jobs distributed throughout the state. And so that brings me to Kevin DeLeon. Kevin has been an incredible champion of justice and energy in this state for years. The number of bills that he's led, the amount of insight that he's brought to this, and the amount of leadership that he's brought to this state and to the world is actually extraordinary. I think that he is somebody who determined very early on the connection between the justice for human beings in this state and the need for vision and leadership. And it's something that he's provided over a number of years that I think is extremely unusual. I think we wouldn't be in the place that we are today in terms of leadership if it hadn't been for Kevin DeLeon. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, but I do think that we're looking at this stage of a group of people who have done something that nobody else has been able to do. And I think that this bill is a perfect example of the kind of leadership and effective government that this state is providing.
Well, good morning. I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to share a few words with each and every one of you. I want to thank very much Lorena Gonzalez for her incredible leadership on the State Assembly floor. You were an excellent vote counter. You helped us cross the finish line, and for that, I will forever be indebted to you. So I want to thank you very much. To my Senate colleagues and to my Assembly colleagues, to the members who are on the stage here today, Bill Quirk, Kevin McCarthy, Ken Cooley, as well as Todd Gloria and Eloise Reyes. I want to thank all of you very much for your strong, steadfast support from day one. And your engagement with our colleagues in the Assembly was very key in helping and assisting Lorena Gonzalez secure the necessary votes. I want to thank you very much because to my colleagues in the Assembly, this was a labor of love from both houses. Although the two letters SB are before 100, I would say this is a California state legislative bill. So I want to thank you very much. I want to thank my successor of the California State Senate, Toni Atkins, for her wonderful leadership and support. I want to give a very special thank you and a recognition to the Speaker, Anthony Rendon, for his leadership, for his facilitating the process to make sure that this measure passed from the Assembly floor. So I want to give a very special recognition, and I recognize good leadership when I see it. And I want to thank Anthony Rendon. To my good friend Tom, you and I have been in many battles together. I know this won't be the last one. And we have really moved policies to the forefront, forcefully, to engage voters up and down the state of California on issues that we care deeply about that help improve the human condition. You're an individual who just doesn't talk the talk, but you walk the walk, and you have proven it. So I want to thank you very much for your incredible leadership, not just for the state of California, but for the entire country. So thank you very much, my friend Tom. Now, today is a historic day. Today, California sends an unmistakable message to the nation and the world. Regardless of who occupies the White House, California will always lead on climate change. Here in California, Democrats and Republicans agree. Climate change is real. It's here, it's deadly, and it's extraordinarily expensive. We are building a bolder future, one with a 100% clean energy grid. A grid that won't poison our children or our planet. 100% clean energy isn't just critical to save our planet. It will unleash and create business opportunities to catalyze the necessary capital that we need to create the vital technologies that are absolutely needed to make sure that we meet our ambitious target goals. And this will also create tens of thousands of jobs, putting Californians to work. We already have 10 times more jobs in the clean energy space in California. That is 10 times more jobs in clean energy space in California than there are coal mining jobs in all of America. So we're going to accelerate that pace and put the metal to the pedal. Now, I've been here several times before. Together with the governor, we were at Griffith Park for Senate Bill 350, where we took California to 50% RPS, renewable energy. We continued taking unprecedented steps by enacting Senate Bill 32, as well as extending our cap and trade system and building more parks and communities together. But today feels extra special. It feels special not just because these are the last days to serve in the August body for some of us, but today we're setting a marker that will be remembered by future generations. We're taking bold action when our country seems to be drifting. It is because of California and because of Californians we can pursue science and fact-based policies to help solve the problems of today. It is because of California we can tackle climate change. Californians have made their voices heard loudly about the future that they want for their state, for the country, and for the world. And today we're taking the necessary steps to heed their call. Now, 3 years ago, I worked with Governor Brown to pass Senate Bill 350, 50% energy by the year 2030. That legislation, we increase it, as I stated, to 50% by the year 2030. As the world's 5th largest economy, we cannot surrender our clean energy future to any other nation, because as Californians, we're going to shape and drive that future. Now, before I close, I want to thank the many environmental, labor, public health, and faith leaders who helped make this passage of this landmark legislation possible. But I also want to thank some very special people. I want to thank Governor Brown's legislative team. I want to thank them very much for helping get this measure across the finish line. From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank my staff, but 2 staff members in particular. My Chief of Staff, Dan Reeves, and my policy advisor when it comes to climate change and environment, Kip Lipper. Both you, Kip, and Dan were very instrumental from day one. And for that, I'll always be highly appreciative of you and all of my staff members, both here in the Capitol as well as the district office. I want to also recall one of the finest public servants I have ever had the pleasure of working with, Nancy McFadden. Nancy McFadden is not here with us today. But Nancy McFadden would have played a pivotal role, as she has on every policy measure when it deals with climate and the environment. So I want to recognize her and give her the respect that she deserves. She's playing a huge role in SB 100. And lastly, I want to thank the governor. Governor Jerry Brown, you and I have accomplished many things together, from SB 1 to Senate Bill 32 to the extension of cap and trade to Senate Bill 350. We have had an incredible ride together. It's a journey that, quite frankly, would not have been possible had you and I not worked together. The leadership that you have demonstrated, not just for us in California, but for the entire nation and for the world, is exemplary. And for that, we owe you the debt, the great debt of gratitude for your leadership. You have shown us the way. You have provided that bold, courageous leadership, the courage of your convictions to do the right thing and to push and to actually take on the establishment authority, the status quo, to make sure we do right by California. I want to thank you very much for your incredible leadership. With that, it brings me great pleasure, and it is an incredible honor to bring up the greatest governor in the history of the state of California, the greatest governor in the United States of America, Governor Jerry Brown.
Well, that level encomium, I will accept the nomination. Anyway, I want to thank everybody here has done really important work. And there's no understating the importance of this measure. SB 100 is sending a message to California and to the world that we're going to meet the Paris Agreement, and we're going to continue down that path to transition our economy to zero emission, zero carbon emission, and to have the resiliency and the sustainability that science tells us we must achieve. This bill and the executive order that I'm going to sign will put California on a path to the goals to meet the Paris Agreement and beyond. It's not going to be easy, and it will not be immediate, but it must be done. California is committed to doing whatever is necessary to meet the existential threat of climate change. And yes, it is an existential threat. No matter what the naysayers may say, it is a real, present danger to California and to the people of the world. This bill and others I'm going to sign this week help us go in this direction. But have no illusions. California and the rest of the world have miles to go before we achieve zero carbon emissions. But you have to begin. You have to get something done. California has been doing stuff that the rest of the world, most of the world, is just hoping they might get to someday. And I want to say, Kevin, your 350 bill that put a cap on the carbon emissions and set a goal, that put everything else in the category of the possible. Without that, we wouldn't be here. So this is not a one-off. This is a series of actions that are leading California in the right direction. Are we in the promised land? By no means. Do we have a long way to go? Yes. the investments needed across broad sectors, the industrial sector, transportation, commercial, residential buildings, agriculture, and ultimately sequestration of carbon and efficient and low-cost battery technology. We have to do all of that, but we have to at least have the goal. We have to know where we are and where we're going. And California is uniquely in that position. So I very proudly stand with the legislators and the activists who have said, this is the way to go, and sure enough, we're going there. So let's get the bill out. Okay, now we saw two things.
Down in front.
Number one is
Camera down.
SB
Cell phone down. Cell phone down.
I'm going to sign, and then after that, I'm going to sign an executive order that puts California on the road to zero carbon emissions. So first, SB 100. Without worrying, that's just still would not be. That's true. But without you, it wouldn't be here either. So we all play our part. All right. This is the executive order, which you can read at your leisure. It's well written and revised many times. Maybe we should give that. Yeah. We should give Steyer something. All right, you have another thing. Here's a couple more. Good. Good. All right. Yeah, we'll sign a few more and we get later. Kevin, I'm giving it to you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for this way. If you want individual interviews with the advocates first, Governor Brown's going to go do some interviews, including almost all of your outlets. Thank you very much.
Hey Dan, see if we can grab
All right, y'all. Well, that was Governor Jerry Brown in California announcing some new legislation there for climate change in California. And that was live from the West Coast. Now we're over on the East Coast here. Gorgeous shot of Wrightsville Beach in North Carolina as we are continuing to track Hurricane Florence, now a Category 4 storm. You've probably kind of heard that in the past few hours. And we are going to be getting an official update from our meteorologist, Gary McGrady, coming up in the next half hour. But for now, enjoy these gorgeous shots here of this beach in North Carolina, which possibly in a few days is going to be more affected by those high winds and rain. They're saying that this storm is primed to hit the Carolinas at the end of the week, so in the Thursday, sort of Friday time frame. And we're going to keep up some live shots here and jump around to our live satellites. You can kind of track what this storm is doing and if it might affect you if you're in that area in the southeast. So more on that from Gary coming up shortly, guys. For now, enjoy this gorgeous shot of the beach. We also have another one a little bit further south in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, to show you as well. So take a look and we'll get an update coming up from Gary. All right, everybody, back in the newsroom here with y'all. I know we said we would have an update for you on the hurricane situation at 2 o'clock Eastern. A couple minutes after 2 right now, and actually our meteorologist is checking for some new information to see if we have anything new coming out on this storm. Now, we have a couple different feeds for you and shots of where it may affect the coastline in the southeast corridor of the Atlantic here, and we have that live satellite that we've been showing you, kind of popping in and out here of Hurricane Florence. But that update is going to come up in the next 10 minutes or so. We're going to have Sam come over, our web producer and additional host here at Fox 5 Live, come give you an update with Gary McGrady. So that's coming up in less than 10 minutes. Stay on with us for that. We'll be showing you some shots of the different beaches down south and what the Weather Service is saying about this storm. Now, the official actual update on this storm isn't really coming till 5 p.m. Eastern, so we'll have all those updates for you on social media, on our digital platforms, and on our TV broadcast tonight at 5, so definitely check us out there. But Sam's coming up next with that update from Gary, and we'll see you again tomorrow, so stay on with us here.
Hey everybody out there on fox5dc.com, on Facebook, Sam and Gary McGrady in the newsroom. We are, as we have been over the weekend, tracking Hurricane Florence. So
now
Gary,
a major
now
hurricane.
Cat 4.
Florence. What does that mean, Cat, right? I mean, category 1 to 5, and yesterday it was barely a hurricane.
Right.
Remember? We were doing this yesterday.
It was just a...
Show, where are we? Is that, what's up? Show that one.
This is it. All right, so you want
I have to
the radar?
point.
Yeah.
I have to point because I'm not sure what sources that she's using.
I'm the
I think this
operator
gives
here.
a nice little sense of really what's happened in the last 24 hours. Now, we could just sit on this right here, Sam, and meteorologically, I could talk about things for an hour in terms of what's going on, but it would get boring for everybody. But a couple of things of interest here. We've seen rapid intensification. Not only was that what we talked about yesterday, but it's what was forecast yesterday. Intensifying hurricanes, well, any intensity forecast for a hurricane or a tropical system for that matter, always the toughest part of the forecast now. So for the Hurricane Center to say it's going to go from a Category 1 hurricane, or really a strong tropical storm, to a Category 4 in about 36 hours, that is amazing. Two things, it's amazing that the storm could do it, and it's amazing, too, that the forecast for that could be spot on in terms of intensity, because that's always the challenge. Hurricane Center will admit that. That's always their greatest challenge. Beautiful hurricane. Florence is looking exactly like what hurricanes look like, and a very, very powerful hurricane as well. There's a couple of things going on. There's high pressure to the north of it. And listen, what's happening here is that the environment out ahead of Florence is very conducive for strengthening. Very little shear or wind aloft. Hurricanes are so intense, but they're very delicate at the same time. It's the irony of the storm that a little bit of wind aloft, 20, 30, 35 mile per hour wind aloft, can really wreck a hurricane. Right now, there's none of that. Very little what we call wind shear. Then the ocean temperature, very high, 80 to 85 degrees. Some cases a little bit more content than that. And the overall energy content of the ocean out there ahead of Florence is quite high. So we expect this intensity maybe to go up a little bit more and then kind of level off, and then Florence will go through intensity cycles. So it'll weaken a little bit, and then they can only go so strong so long, then they weaken naturally, and then they ramp up their intensity again. But that's a beautiful picture, and you can see just how quickly this hurricane has become that classic hurricane. In terms of what's going on, I mentioned the high pressure to the north, highs, lows, other weather patterns around hurricanes steer them. So this is what we're seeing now with a big high, Bermuda high. It's been in place most of the summer. It's why we've been so wet. It's probably been so humid the last several days. So you can see the track here from the Hurricane Center out ahead of it. And honestly, guys, the track here has not changed much. I talked about water temperature. So out ahead of the storm, 83 to 87 degree water temperatures. That's amazing, and that's the fuel. Anything over 80 degrees, a fuel for the storm. So in terms of what happened early this morning, it basically nothing has changed in terms of the possible landfall areas. The Carolinas are all getting ready for this. They've already been some mandatory evacuations for Cape Hatteras, a couple of waves of that, and then all the way up through the Delmarva, even southern Jersey. We obviously need to plan for this. And I'm telling you right now, even though the new European model just came in, that's why we waited to go on the air, and it is starting to shift a little bit more northward. The European was the farthest south. The American model kind of moving it into Cape Hatteras, maybe even stalling. But the European shows a little bit of a northward movement in the overall landfall late Thursday and into Friday. Again, just a little movement, but maybe it's something. And all we're looking for here is the models to become a little bit more in agreement, and then we'll get a better idea of what is happening. All right, I think we'll go now to the slide that shows, okay, another beautiful picture. This is infrared, and I've colorized it so that you can see the brightest colors around the eye. Look how sharp and well defined this eye is. Let's zoom down. It has become, Florence has become a buzzsaw overnight tonight. So all the color around the eye there, all that dark red, that's just higher cloud tops, colder cloud tops. Storm is venting now at all levels. It's venting. It's continuing to get a little stronger. There is some thought that the cloud tops have stopped cooling a little bit in the last several hours, and that means it's probably reached its maximum intensity. It could still go up, 5, 10 miles per hour more, but probably not much more than it is right now. We're getting really good venting at all levels. It's very centrifugal. Centrifugal. It's very symmetric, is what I'm trying to say. Very, very round, and again, it looks like that classic hurricane. Florence right now, Category 4. We mentioned that 1 to 5. The wind topped out at 1:30 from the hurricane center. That was at 12 o'clock. They were measuring it earlier. The original 11 o'clock, I believe, the original 11 o'clock notice from the hurricane center was using the clouds and whatnot to try and give a good idea of how strong Florence was. But then by noon, the hurricane hunters were in the storm, and they reported back that it was sustained winds of about 130 miles per hour. So that was the latest update at 12 o'clock from the Hurricane Center. And so far, we haven't had any other updates from the Hurricane Center.
Yeah, let's
you know
pull
what?
up their...
Yeah, pull that up, just so we know.
The tweet?
The tweet, or just the web page from the Hurricane Center too, and we can look through that. So there's the latest tweet, we think, unless they've tweeted something out.
Yeah, we can double check.
Well, let's just double check so that we got the most.
We can hit the refresh
Yeah, just hit
button.
refresh and see what happens here. That's
Nothing
cool.
new.
Nothing new. Which
Just
leads
yet.
me to believe they haven't gotten anything else from the Hurricane Center, from the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. So there's Florence right there. We'll just. So that's the 11 a.m. advisory, and the latest thing they have it at 130. See how it said at 11 a.m. right here, and then it showed 115 miles per hour? That was based on satellite imagery. But then once the plane got there, they released a new statement at lunchtime, and it kicked it up to 130 miles per hour.
Wow.
So that's kind of what the Hurricane Center does. Once the planes get in there, they can verify exactly what they're seeing on satellite. And not only that, but the planes are dropping, getting more data from the storm, putting that into models, and things just get better. The forecast just gets better and better and better. So I tell you what, go back to my graphic here, Sam, and we'll show the track. The track hasn't really changed much from the Hurricane Center at all. Still several days away. The storm's about 1,200 miles, give or take a few miles, from Wilmington, North Carolina. It's about 1,200 miles as well from Ocean City. So just kind of give everybody an idea. In terms of the intensity forecast along the way, it may bump up to 150 mile per hour hurricane. That's still a Category 4. In order to get to Category 5, which is the highest category, it would have to get to 157. So we hope it doesn't do that. Okay, obviously we hope it doesn't do that.
But they did try, so we saw a couple of numbers from the hurricane trackers that said a little bit higher than the 130.
Yeah, I think the 145 we were seeing may have been a gust.
Okay.
It may have been a gust that they measured.
Okay.
And I couldn't get confirmation from the Hurricane Center that they had found sustained winds of 145 miles per hour. That's really what we got to do. And you should know too, obviously I have a lot of experience with tropical storms and severe weather and whatnot, but I don't forecast hurricanes.
Right.
Any responsible meteorologist, a broadcast meteorologist, should leave this to the Hurricane Center. Because the reason why we go with this Hurricane Center forecast exclusively is because that way the message is the same. You see what I'm saying? So those people in the area that would be evacuating or wanting to know, we leave it to the Hurricane Center to be the one voice in terms of what is the forecast, in terms of what is the preparation, in terms of what is any type of evacuation orders.
You want to be like a unified front.
Correct, because think about it this way. If I were to say, oh, no, those guys down there, they don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
This hurricane's not going to hit us. Well, that's ridiculous. That's irresponsible of me for doing that.
Right.
They know exactly what they're doing down there. So we leave it to them. We yield the forecast to them. Now, we'll talk about the different variations and maybe this model, that model, and the spread. And
Right. You can kind of compare and contrast between the American and European models.
And there's
a whole other discussion.
there's all kinds of models.
Yeah.
It's not just the American and the European.
spaghetti model.
It just, we try to keep it simple for everybody else. Okay, go back to my graphic
Yeah,
here. Let me
let's
show
pull
you. Now
it
look,
out.
because we zero things in here just so you get an idea. This is late Thursday into early Friday, probably late Thursday night, right? And right now the official forecast is for it to move into southern sections of North Carolina. We have the line in here, but hurricane's not a line, obviously. This is starting to remind me of Hurricane Fran back in 1996,
Okay.
September 1996. Okay, so it was almost the same track, did devastation along the North Carolina coast where it made landfall, and then it went inland. And the reason I bring up Fran is because obviously Fran, if you live in North Carolina, as I did for several years,
I know you're from there,
the benchmark of hurricanes is Fran. Everybody talks about Fran. Hugo was South Carolina, Fran was North Carolina, then there was also Floyd in North Carolina, totally different storms. One thing that Fran did was...
Floyd hit a lot of...
Well, Floyd was a rainer. Floyd was a flooder. Okay, Fran did damage with a lot of wind into interior North Carolina. But again, the reason I bring up Fran is because Fran came up along basically this same path, turned north through North Carolina and up into Virginia. And the heaviest rain from Fran was over 16 inches in central Virginia, not in North Carolina. Now, there's a lot of different reasons for that. There's a lot of variables for where the greatest rain is from a tropical system. But as Florence more than likely comes ashore somewhere around the Carolinas, our big concern, the way we see it now, will be the rain, the flooding. There'll be some wind, yes, but flooding is a huge, huge problem, and freshwater flooding is a huge, huge problem with any tropical system that comes ashore. So that's what we basically know now. Nothing has changed, obviously, much in the forecast track. I'll say this, at 5 we'll get a brand new update, more discussions, more tropical tracks, forecasting, intensity, everything. So we'll know more at 5 o'clock. And as I mentioned earlier...
this is still a TBC. To be continued.
Oh, it's going to be a to be continued until it makes landfall.
Right.
And
even then,
the American model suggests, and it has suggested for the last day and a half, that Florence would move just east of Cape Hatteras and literally sit there and spin for 24 hours or so as a very strong hurricane. As I mentioned earlier, the European model now is shifting a little bit farther up into North Carolina, northern South Carolina. So these little bitty changes in models from day to day, and we don't want to get wrapped up into that. We still have to follow the overall meteorology of what's happening ahead of the storm to kind of give us an idea. But right now it looks like bullseye would be obviously the Carolinas and Southern Virginia. And then how it comes ashore. Does it come ashore and work up I-95? Then it brings us a whole lot of rain and some wind too. And we would have actually here in the DC metro area get some problems from that.
Yeah.
So it's one to watch. We'll do more. Can we do more at 5?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll come back at 5 o'clock too. So those of you that are on Facebook, if you're watching us on Facebook and then the YouTube kind of lives out there for a long time as well.
YouTube, Facebook, on fox5dc.com/live.
Well, I'm looking in our Facebook feed here too.
We're looking to see what everybody's comments are.
All Maryland and DC will get hammered with rain. That's probably true to some extent. Specifically, how much? Everyone. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
So flooding will be a huge problem from this. There's no doubt about that. Depending on the path. I mean, if it stays east of us, then it won't be that big of a deal.
But what kind of power does it take to get inland like that? Because I mean,
it's all about
Harvey didn't even get that far.
Did I tell you yesterday that hurricanes want to go north? They
Yes.
always want to turn north.
Yes.
Okay, so they're looking for the first opportunity they can find a weakness to turn north.
Okay.
So that's a huge question mark left with the path of this is how fast will it start to turn north? Obviously, if it takes the track that the Hurricane Center is showing, it won't really turn north until it gets well into North Carolina. The European model suggests it'll stay in North Carolina and just dump copious amounts of rain. This unbelievable thing of more than 25, 30 inches of rain is what the European was showing for central and western North Carolina. But if it turns north faster, it could just go over the Cape Hatteras and brush the East Coast, which would mean less rain for us. The most rain is always on the northern and the eastern side of the storm. Okay? So
Which may be us.
It could be us.
Yes.
It could be us. It probably will be to some extent us.
Right.
All right, that's what we know now, based on the latest forecast track.
Well, we will check back.
We're coming back a little
keep
after
our eyes
5.
on. Yeah, we'll be
Okay?
back after 5. Gary will have the latest of what the forecasters, all the meteorologists
Yeah,
are
and I
looking at,
suspect that
and,
I suspect that the intensity will be up just a little bit, the winds will be a little bit higher, the pressure will be a little bit lower, and we'll probably see pretty much the same forecast track at 5 o'clock. That's my prediction in terms of what we're going to see.
We will see.
We'll hopefully at 5 we'll talk more about potential rain. I'll show you a couple of different model scenarios for rain. So you get a bit.
Different paths.
Yeah.
Okay.
A couple of different ideas.
We will talk then.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay tuned for our Facebook page and YouTube for the latest. Hey guys, Sam here in the newsroom, just checking back in. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that forecast from Gary. We're going to be bringing you more as we are tracking Hurricane Florence in the Atlantic and see where it's headed and what they expect to happen here in the DC area. Right now there is a White House press conference going on. This is with Chief Economic Advisor Kevin Hassett, and he's talking about some economic growth going on in the country right now. So let's check in with that.
Because so many people are coming in, and the people who've been out for a while tend to be lower skilled, and so they can bring averages down if you don't control for that. And so in our study, we controlled for all that and showed that just as is consistent with our 4.2% GDP growth, we're seeing a massive amount of wage growth right now compared to what projections were when President Trump took office. And I don't see Sarah telling me I have to stop, so should I keep going? Okay. Oh, yeah, I'll go back there, and then I've been right-handed, and that's really terrible. I apologize. Yeah.
To keep these trends going, how important is it for you to have a new North American free trade agreement, including Canada?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And the first thing before I turn to the trade part of the question is that some people have also said, well, sure, the economy's strong, but that's a sugar high. But it's not a sugar high at all, because what's happened is that the capital spending boom that we promised would happen if we passed the tax cuts is underway. And the cool thing about capital spending is that people build factories. That's what capital spending is. And they do that in the first half of the year. It's up 10% since the beginning of the year. And then in the second half of the year, those factories start producing output, so you get more output. And so the idea that the trend might not continue, that it's a sugar high, is just inconsistent with the form that the growth is taking. And as for NAFTA, Ambassador Lighthizer and the whole team have been in negotiations with Canada. We continue to be hopeful that they'll sign on to the 21st century deal with Mexico, which is really a better deal for American workers, and they should sign on to that. And so I'll come over here and I'll go back to you. Yes, thanks.
Hi, Anish with PBS NewsHour. I have a question about income inequality. Can you talk a little bit about whether or not you've seen income inequality shrink, and are you at all concerned about whether or not people that are just poor, not just people that are in the economy, but actual poor people that are living beyond the poverty line, below the poverty line, are they being improved by this economy?
Yeah, they certainly are. Certainly, think about it. All the new entrants that get a job, that they go from having zero wage to having a wage, but they won't necessarily show up in the wage statistics. Those people are better off. And there are a number of other ways that people are better off, too, because of the growth in the economy, but also because of policies that have given resources to families that are needy. At the CEA, we put out a different report over the summer on what's going on with poverty correctly measured. And then in the Stay Tuned department, there's important data coming out this week, which will help us look at how income inequality has changed over, not in this year, but over the previous year. My expectation is that that data will start to turn, and that this year we're going to see a decline in income inequality because blue-collar wages are starting to grow. And it's a final point, and it's a really important point that you bring up, and I want to emphasize it because I care so much about it. The fact is that we're at a historic moment because we're deep into a recovery. The unemployment rate is really low, and we've created a capital spending boom. And so normally what happens if you don't have a capital spending boom is that people start to bid up the wages for folks, but they're bidding them up because there's a shortage of labor. What's happening now is they're bidding up wages because people have better machines to work with and their productivity is going up. That means that the recovery can last longer, and that's really, really good for workers, especially at the low end. And so it's precisely at this moment in economic history, if you look at past economic booms, where income inequality has declined. And if we were to blow it and have a recession because of bad policy right now, then we'd lose an enormous opportunity on income inequality. And then I'll come right here. Yeah.
Also, two.
And then I guess it's the last question.
Sorry, two quick ones. Sorry.
Is he allowed to? You tell me. Do you like this guy? Okay.
You said I prefer to give blame or credit to policies rather than individuals, but your trend charts start with his election. Obviously, when he wasn't even president, he didn't put any policies in place. So how do you decide when to start that, given that policies couldn't have been in place for months afterwards?
Yeah, so Robert Lucas, famous Chicago, who won the Nobel Prize at the University of Chicago, got the Nobel Prize for answering your question back in the early 70s. But the basic point is that America's businesses especially, that their activity is forward-looking. And so if you want to model their investment today, then you have to understand the fact that they're forming expectations not just about this month, but about the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And so if you look at what happened the moment that President Trump was elected, both in equity markets and in sentiment surveys, is that people started to ratchet up their expectations for what would happen to the economy. Perhaps everybody except for Mrs. Clinton's supporters was starting to do that right after the election. And the fact is that those expectations turned out to be rational because the turnaround that they expected is something that we see, as you just saw in the data. Let me hand it back to Sarah now, but close by saying that anyone who wants to follow up and talk about the data, you can tell I kind of like to do that. So feel free to reach out through the press office and connect with me over at the CEA. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. A couple of announcements and updates, and I'll take your questions. Last week, the Senate Judiciary Committee, under Chairman Grassley, conducted a thorough and transparent week of hearings, allowing each senator ample time to thoroughly review the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh. Unfortunately, many committee Democrats and protesters attempted to turn the hearing into a circus. Nonetheless, Judge Kavanaugh demonstrated exactly why President Trump nominated him. He showed his respect for the Constitution, impeccable qualifications, and extraordinary temperament. Judge Kavanaugh reinforced the bedrock principles of judicial independence and the rule of law. And we look forward to the Judiciary Committee completing its review and advancing his nomination. On another matter, later today by phone and also tomorrow in person at the White House, President Trump is scheduled to receive a briefing from DHS Secretary Nielsen and FEMA Administrator Long. The latest briefing is part of the president's monitoring of multiple storms that are predicted to affect the U.S. in the coming days. The White House has been in contact with governors' offices and local authorities in Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Hawaii, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York just since Saturday morning. Lines of communication remain open and the federal government stands ready to assist. These tropical storms and hurricanes are very dangerous, and we encourage anyone in the path to heed the warnings of state and local officials who have the expertise and knowledge of their communities to provide the best on-ground information. Lastly, we extend our deepest condolences to the family of Secret Service Agent Colin Johnson. Agent Johnson has served his country honorably, first as a Marine and then in the Secret Service. Many of you know him. He was larger than life, literally, was a great friend, father, husband, and member of the United States Secret Service. The men and women in the Secret Service are among the most honorable and dedicated public servants you can find anywhere in the world, and Colin was among the very best of them. And although he was assigned to Chief of Staff John Kelly, he was always there to help anyone who needed it. Our hearts are broken, and Agent Johnson will be greatly missed. Our prayers are with his entire family. And with that, I'll take your questions, John.
If I could start out sort of with the topic of the day, and that's the anonymous op-ed in the New York Times. But the president said on Friday that he thought it would be a good idea for Jeff Sessions to look into this. Is there anything about what was published by the New York Times that would warrant an investigation by the Department of Justice?
Certainly, if there's an individual, whether or not, since we don't know who they are, if that individual is in meetings where national security is being discussed or other important topics, and they are attempting to undermine the executive branch, that would certainly be problematic and something that the Department of Justice should look into.
So would that be a suggestion of misuse of classified information? I mean, what realm would that fall in?
Once again, it's something that the Department of Justice should simply look into, and that's for them to make that determination.
And I just have one quick follow-up on that, if I could. Is the White House actively trying to find out who this person is, or do you not really care and you're moving on to other things?
We're certainly focused on things that actually matter, and the staff here that is here to do their job and not undermine the great work that this president and this administration has done. And we're going to continue focusing on that. It's frankly, I think, sad and pathetic that a gutless, anonymous source could receive so much attention from the media. And I think that the American people would be much better served if we actually spent some time talking about some of the really important things that are facing our country and the things that this administration is doing to help fix them. Justin.
Has the president received the Kim Jong-un letter from the State Department? If so, can you share any details about the content or tone, or if there were any commitments or requests from the North Korean leader?
Yeah, the president has received the letter from Kim Jong-un. It was a very warm, very positive letter. We won't release the full letter unless the North Korean leader agrees that we should. The primary purpose of the letter was to request and look to schedule another meeting with the president, which we are open to and are already in the process of coordinating that. The recent parade in North Korea, for once, was not about their nuclear arsenal. The president has achieved tremendous success with his policies so far, and this letter was further evidence of progress in that relationship. A number of things that have taken place. The remains have come back. The hostages have returned. There's been no testing of missiles or nuclear material, and of course the historic summit between the two leaders. And this letter is just further indication of the progress that we hope to continue to make.
The expectation that that second meeting would be here in Washington. I know that's something that the president.
We'll let you know when we have further details, but certainly something that we want to take place, and we'll already continue to work on making that happen.
To follow up on that, you mentioned the remains being returned, the hostages, the lack of testing, which were all happening when the president cited a lack of progress. and canceled Secretary Pompeo's trip. So other than these really nice words from Kim and a parade, what signs of progress warrant this new optimism from President Trump?
Again, certainly the most recent parade this weekend, one of the first times I believe that they have had parades similar where they weren't highlighting their nuclear arsenal. We consider that a sign of good faith. And again, the letter from Kim Jong-un to the president certainly showed a commitment to continuing conversations, continuing to work on the progress that they have had since their meeting just a few months ago, and also a continued commitment to focus on denuclearization of the peninsula.
I have a separate question on Bob Woodward, because President Trump continues to call him a liar and says his book is completely a work of fiction. He's also mentioned libel laws quite a bit. Is President Trump considering filing a lawsuit against Woodward?
Certainly keep you posted on that, but I think we've been extremely clear from the beginning. Many of the book's sources have already spoken out to refute. A couple of them, Chief of Staff John Kelly, aggressively pushed back in this. General Mattis aggressively pushing back in the claims. John Dowd also pushing back against the things that are attributed to him. And a number of people have come out and said that Woodward never even reached out to corroborate statements that were attributed to them, which seems incredibly reckless for a book to make such outrageous claims, to not even take the time to get a $10 fact checker to call around and verify that some of these quotes were happened. When no effort was made, it seems like a very careless and reckless way to write a book. John?
Sarah, the president said that he was looking into whether or not to take action against the New York Times for publishing the anonymous op-ed. Does the president not think that that op-ed is protected by the First Amendment? Does he really think that the federal government should contemplate action against a newspaper for publishing an article?
I think it's less about that part of it and whether or not somebody is actively trying to undermine the executive branch of the government and a duly elected president of the United States. If they don't want to be part of that process, they shouldn't be here. See?
He tweeted earlier, and it's been a while since we've had a chance to talk to you, so this goes back a little while, but he tweeted last week that suggesting that the Justice Department should not be prosecuting those two Republican congressmen because it might hurt Republican chances in November. Is the president really trying to suggest or outright saying that the Justice Department shouldn't be investigating or prosecuting allies of the president if it might hurt his party's political chances?
Certainly, the president thinks that no one is above the law. What he would like to see is a fair playing field, that there also be, there have been a number of concerns raised about individuals, both in the FBI and the Department of Justice, that have been ignored, and we'd like to see those looked at as well. Steve?
But with those two prosecutions, he doesn't want to go forward because they're his allies?
I can't weigh in right now on an active investigation, but I can tell you that the president doesn't think anyone is above the law, and we're simply stating that there should be cause for concern of a number of things that have happened both in the Department of Justice and the FBI, that we'd like to see those looked at as well.
Back to North Korea, how soon would you like to have this second meeting?
I don't have any specifics on the exact timing, as these conversations for the second meeting are taking place now, and as we have more details, I'll certainly let you know.
Could you just update us on where the Canada trade talks stand?
We continue to have ongoing conversations with the Canadians and are still hopeful that we'll come to an agreement with them. Jeff?
Sarah, do you know if the president believes these denials that have been coming in from some of his top advisors, or does he believe that it's someone from within? And does he believe that lie detector tests should be issued, as the vice president volunteered to do on Sunday?
No lie detectors are being used or talked about or looked at as a possibility. Frankly, the White House and the staff here are focused on doing our jobs and trying to show up here every day and do what we can to help better the American people, not deal with cowards that refuse to put their names in an anonymous letter.
He tweeted something on Friday after George Papadopoulos was sentenced. He said 14 days for $28 million, $2 million a day, no collusion. What was he talking about, the $28 million?
I'd have to go back and check and look at that. I didn't see that. Sorry.
Sarah,
the price tag of the Rush investigation? Because if so, that's highly inflated.
Again, I'd have to check, Jeff. I'm not sure of that reference. Sorry.
Decision if he'll testify yet or not? If I can just follow with that as
That's a question I refer you to outside counsel. David?
Pennsylvania tomorrow. What does he plan to say, and what does he hope to accomplish with this year's 9/11 address?
Certainly the focus will be on remembering that horrific day and remembering the lives that were lost, and certainly honoring the individuals who were not only lost that day but also put their lives on the line to help in that process. He'll be there, and the Vice President will be here in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon. David?
Sarah, thank you very much. I'm assuming you've read Bob Woodward's book. I know a lot of us have. Can we expect, other than repeating denials from General Mattis, General Kelly, John Dowd, can we expect the White House to give us a list of all the things in the book that are wrong and that qualify Woodward to be a liar?
I think that would be a complete and utter waste of our time,
Okay,
so no.
Hold on a second. Because then that goes to this Quinnipiac poll that came out today that says 55% of Americans believe that the op-ed writer in the Times is right. And the president's getting a 60% negative rating on the honest and truthful. 60% of Americans think he's a dishonest person. So does the president think he can actually win a credibility battle with Bob Woodward, who's an august member of the press corps, helped take Richard Nixon down, and is a legend? How can he win that credibility battle?
Once again, I think I would certainly rather take the actual on-record account from people who are here, who have been working in this building, who have interacted with the president day in, day out, like General Mattis, like General Kelly, like myself, not disgruntled former employees that refuse to put their name on things when they come out to attack the president. I think that those are far more credible sources and certainly far more reliable voices within this administration, and that can accurately tell what's taken place in the building behind me.
Is the president still a credible voice?
Absolutely. John?
Thanks a lot, Sarah. You've said a lot, the president has said a lot about the publication of this op-ed. You've called it, the president has called it a betrayal. You've called it an act of disloyalty. But the president, as has been mentioned quite a few times, even here in this briefing, has called on the Department of Justice to investigate the publication of this op-ed. There is no violation of the criminal code that goes along with the publication of this op-ed. So I'm a little curious as to what it is that the president believes may have been violated in the law as it relates to the publication of this op-ed piece.
Once again, we would consider someone who is actively trying to undermine the executive branch of our government inappropriate and something certainly to cause concern, and they should take a look at it.
Violation.
Well, once again, we're just saying that this gives a great level of concern, and they should look into it.
So it's not a violation of the law. Just being concerned is not a violation of law. I'm just looking to see.
I'm not an attorney. It's the Department of Justice to make that determination, and we're asking them to look into it and make that determination. And they certainly are fully capable of doing that. But someone actively trying to undermine the duly elected president and the entire executive branch of government, that seems quite problematic to me and something that they should take a look at. John?
Thank you, Sarah. Just to try to specify this a bit, is the White House treating the anonymous op-ed writer as a full-fledged breach of security matter, and is the FBI investigating both staff and their means of communications, cell phones and computers and the like?
I'm not aware of that level. That wouldn't be something I would be a part of, but certainly, as I just told your colleague, we think that there is a concern here and it should be looked into. David?
One other question.
Sorry, Mark. Go ahead, John.
Did the obviously the whole world watched when Jair Bolsonaro, the front-running Brazilian presidential candidate, was stabbed last week. Has the president called or sent any statement to his family at all?
I'm not aware that the president has, but I do believe members of the administration have reached out, and I'll work to get you the specifics of who that was. David?
Sarah, what does the president make of all of this talk of the 25th Amendment and some of what he hears on media outlets regarding the word crazy talk? There's a lot of, it seems like there's a lot of talk about that on many of the mainstream media outlets.
I think we would say that it's about as ridiculous as most of Bob Woodward's book. The fact that that's actually being honestly discussed is ridiculous, and frankly, it's insulting to the nearly 62 million people that came out and overwhelmingly supported this president, voted for him, supported his agenda, and are watching and cheering on as he successfully implements that agenda every single day. Sager.
Thanks, Sarah. Can you give us a sense of what documents the president is considering for declassification sometime in the next 2 weeks? And when exactly can we expect them?
When we have specifics on that, we'll let you know.
Give us a sense of what the documents are, though.
I can't get into that right now, but when we have an announcement on it, I'll certainly let you know. Stephen.
Sarah, I want to ask you about the Mideast peace process, because today the State Department announced it is going to close the Palestinian mission here in Washington. The Palestinian ambassador to the U.S. accuses this country of murdering the peace process and undermining its role in the peace process. The State Department says that it's not retreating from our efforts to achieve a lasting and comprehensive peace. Which is it? How is the United States still an honest broker in this process?
Certainly, we've been very upfront throughout the process in the fact that we want to see peace. We want to have those conversations. We want to help broker that deal. And we're going to continue pushing forward. Beyond that, I don't have anything specific on it today.
Close the office. The Palestinians are saying that the U.S. can no longer be an honest broker. This is another example, they say, of the fact that the U.S. is too aligned with Israel. Is that not the case?
Certainly, we have a great deal of support with our friend and ally in Israel. But again, we are as committed today as we've ever been to the peace process.
Thank you. On Friday, President talked about a new trade deal with India. What kind of trade agreement he's talking about? What kind of agreement he wants with India?
I know that a number of administration officials just recently came back from India. They expressed their willingness to negotiate new and better trade deals, and those conversations are at the beginning stages, and we'll certainly keep you posted as we get further in the process. Hallie?
Thank you, Sarah. One on the ICC, but I want to follow up on Stephen's question on the peace process here. And just, you say the door continues to be open and that you're still working on it. But is it realistic for the president to believe he can actually achieve peace in the Middle East in his first term in office, as he's promised to do, something that his son-in-law is working on as well, when the administration has taken steps that Palestinians themselves have said do not help?
Again, certainly we are very much committed to the process, and we're still hopeful we can get there.
The ICC, John Bolton today said that the administration would sanction the International Criminal Court, which is a move that seems to be a reversion to sort of Bush-era policies. Is it fair to say that this administration is now shifting toward a more hardline stance toward the ICC? And if, in fact, it is so feckless, then why is the U.S. so concerned?
Certainly, the president is committed to defending our national sovereignty and all of our security interests, which would include using any means necessary to protect our citizens, those of our allies, from unjust prosecution by the ICC. Their announcement that they would consider opening an investigation into, among other parties, U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan is a threat to American sovereignty. And if they proceed with that, then the United States would consider those options that Ambassador Bolton laid out today.
So why the concern? If the ICC is in fact dead to you, as John Bolton said today, then what is the concern that the U.S. has if in fact they do not move
because
forward?
They told us they were on the verge of making that decision, and we're letting them know our position ahead of them making that decision. I'll take one last question. David.
Sarah, the editor of the Global Times, which is Beijing's premier foreign policy outlet, wrote on Twitter today that the president blames China on North Korea quite a bit, but now that there seems to be some improvement in North Korea's stance, does China deserve some credit? He suggested that they do. What do you think about that? Does China now deserve credit? Doesn't believe China's acting better?
I think that the president deserves the credit in this process. He's been the lead voice and the one that put the initial pressure on North Korea. Certainly, the president has very publicly expressed his gratitude towards President Xi for the role that they played. He would have liked to have seen them continue to step up and do more. Frankly, we'd still like to see them step up and do more. But the credit in this process at this point and where we are, I would say, belongs to President Trump. We're going to continue to hopefully work with President Xi and his team and his administration to continue making progress.
Given that you're scheduling a second meeting, it sounded like with Kim Jong-un, does the president believe that it's really he has to negotiate this out almost personally with Kim, given that once the two leaders have left, things seem to go poorly, and then they have to reschedule another meeting? Is it?
I don't know that it's gone poorly, considering steps have been taken by the North Koreans to show signs of good faith.
Progress.
Right. but other steps have been taken, so I wouldn't say that it's gone poorly. But at the end of the day, ultimately, it's always going to be best when you can have the two leaders sit down, particularly from the North Korean side. As we know, most of the decisions are going to have to be run through Kim Jong-un. Certainly, he's going to want to talk to his counterpart in President Trump. We think it's important, and we're glad that we're making progress. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Ron DeSantis attending racially charged events.
Yeah, I got you.
Yep, I got you.
Yep.
Yes, I hear you too.